All right. I'd like to call November 1st, 2021, Lethbridge School Division organizational meeting to order. I'm Sharon Gilmore, Superintendent, and I will chair the organizational meeting until the point where a new board chair is elected. So that will bring us to our first agenda item, and that is the election of chair. I will call 3 times for nominations for chair of the School Division Board of Trustees. I call for nominations for the School Division chair for the Board of Trustees. Are there any nominations? Hi.
I would like to nominate Christine Lake for board chair.
Are there other nominations? That's great.
I nominate Allison Purcell for chair.
Are there other nominations? I'll formally put a second call for nomination for chair of the School Division Board of Trustees. Third and final call for nomination for chair of the School Division Board of Trustees. We have 2 individuals who have been nominated, Christina Light and Allison Purcell. And with that, our Secretary Treasurer, you already have the ballot.
Yes.
Yes. Yep, so go ahead. So, Christy. Yes, we have all to speak. And so we'll start with the first nominated person, Christine, and then Al. Okay, thank you. Prior to the first board meeting of last term, I was approached by a fellow board member who asked me if I'd be willing to be nominated for the position of chair. My response to this individual was that it would not be responsible leadership to do so. I was not experienced as a board member, and as such, did not have the tenure to, in my opinion, lead a team, let alone a division. I stand by this belief today. A wise leader takes the necessary time to learn the role and gain a deeper and broader understanding of the team and or organization they are leading. You cannot and do not learn trusteeship by attending meetings alone, even though this is valuable. I did not become a trustee to be chair. I wanted to grow understanding of the division, champion equity and inclusion, and have a voice in a system that was directly impacting my own children. I have grown a deeper understanding of governance over the past 4 years. For the first 3 years of last term, our board was led in a style that was exceptionally different from my own. I put my name forward to be chair because I saw unity throughout our division. I believe that for system improvement, there must be reciprocal, trusting relationship between members. Accountability with respect to the professionalism of all staff, respect to experience, and respect to the story of each person. We will not always agree, but we must be moving in the same direction. I'm collaborative and relationship driven. I am not a micromanager. I have a strong ability to hear all sides, to be objective, to maintain a larger picture view, to take all perspectives into consideration. I am respectful. I am able to hold difficult conversations and willing to have them. And I am diplomatic in my approach. In the past year as chair, I have intentionally grown a relationship between the board and division office. This has increased open communication and productive movement forward in improvement. We are partners with different and distinct roles. We must work together and not versus each other to impact positive change. Parent voice is an issue and a conversation that has been held for the past 4 years, and we are working towards this to strengthen. And we must grow opportunity for community members to feel heard. To do this, We must extend intentional opportunities outside of already existing formal opportunities. This has been begun with the community engagement website that was launched. And the re-entry plan was the first piece of information that we launched on this plan. And the intention of the plan was to receive honest and open feedback from our stakeholders. We wanted feedback on how things are received in school startup and how all stakeholders experience their startup. We have had conversations regarding not all being comfortable giving their names and feedback to the community engagement committee. And this has been heard. And to show that this has been heard, on our reentry plan feedback survey, staff emails were optional on this form. And we need to continue to work towards understanding the why behind this concern. Because the fact that this is being said shows that there are gaps that need to be addressed. As chair, I led the division well through pandemic without wavering from the vision, mission, and values of our division. And I believe I represented our division well and connected with many stakeholders. The chair serves at the pleasure of the board. And as a collective, we seven decide what kind of a board that we want to be. Last week, we each took an oath to execute our role with diligence, which is care and faithfulness. And I hope we are one that is trustworthy and aligns with our core values. It would be my honor to continue to serve as chair for this second term. Thank you.
Thank you. We are a brand new board at the beginning of a brand new term. And while there is something to be said for continuity, reflecting the former chair, re-electing the former term will not allow the new board to set out our own way of doing things and decide what works for this board. When we look at the campaigns that we ran on, it was most of us looking at transparency, accountability, and communication. We heard from communities that wanted engagement. I have a proven track record of bringing a board to be able to change what was needed to have transparency, accountability, and most importantly, to be able to engage with its members. With my experience in leadership with others in council associations, we were able to allow engagement for members across the province that otherwise did not feel they were able to engage in the process that was not available. I led a team to look at some pie in the sky ideas and decide what was most important and achieved our board. Prior to COVID and this virtual way that we do things now, back in November 2019, I led the board and association in hosting a province-wide virtual engagement opportunity where every parent in the province can participate. We had Minister Lethbridge on for the afternoon and had engaged dialogue with many questions answered. We also found out from our members what was important to them, and I led that team that was able to adapt to what our members said was important to them, and I can do the same with this board. I also bring to the table my 14 years of media experience and training. I've spent a lot of time in front of the camera, on radio shows, doing newspaper interviews, primarily on educational issues. I've been able to speak confidently and represent the voice of those that have been elected to present or on a message that we strive to convey. And I feel that I can continue to do that when we look at the advocacy positions that we want to bring forward and speak about and do that confidently. I have relationships and networks with other divisions and trustees from across the province as well as in our area. And I'm able to look to them when we do need some input and wisdom, when we look to them to figure out ways that we can do things together and when we work together to advocate on important issues. I'll finish off by saying that we have one opportunity to make first impression. We can come out of the gates looking very similar to the previous board with the same chair and potentially the same vice chair. Or we can come out with our first impression being that we want something differently and want to present a new board. We will always cherish the wisdom that the incumbents bring to the table, but we can do that in many different ways. I encourage you to honor me to be the chair of this board as we walk through the next year together, and certainly move forward from that. So as we begin our brand new term as a brand new team with our own ways of doing things.
Secretary Treasurer Christine White will distribute ballots. Okay, Christine. That's
I was gonna say, why do we put the three of you in a row?
Oh, the last time we get all put together. Christine Lee will distribute ballots. And so certainly you can please hold your ballot and you hold it up when you would like to continue to that ballot. Christine and I, when she collects all the ballots, step out of the room and we will come back in and then announce the ballot for you.
Were you? Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. It's okay. That's okay. Good. Steps. Yeah. Let's see. Glad to hear it.
Thank you, Christine. And I'd like to announce that the board chair for the 2021-22 school year moving into the fall of 2022 is Allison Christoph. Congratulations. And with that, I'd like to make a motion to destroy the ballot.
I so moved.
And Allison, I invite you to join the seat of the chair and we'll take a few minutes while Allison gets organized and then we can proceed with the nomination of vice chair.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the support and the team will work together and move forward and we value your voice at the table and the diverse voices that we have. And we might move forward to some good positions. So with that, I'll move on to the approval of the agenda. So are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Greg, did you have an addition to the agenda?
Now, this is the organizational meeting. This is the organizational meeting for the oh yes, I'd like to add the portion of the in-camera meeting and where it comes in during our regular.
Excellent. So you would like to
Make a
add to
motion.
the agenda?
Yeah, I'd like
discussing
to approve that.
meeting agenda? order of meeting again. Order of meeting, perfect. Where would you like to put that? I would say 8. Great. Are there any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, can I have a motion to approve the agenda? As amended. Christine will do that as amended, thank you. And all in favor? And that's great. Okay, and we'll move on to the election of the chair. Sharon, tell me what I'll for lead, so I'll do first call for nominations for vice chair. Andrea?
I nominate Christine White as vice chair.
Thank you. Christine, who is that?
I do.
Yeah.
I'll nominate Greg White as the vice chair.
Thank you. And Craig, do you accept?
Yes, I would.
Thank you. And more on first call. And then I'll go on to second call for nominations for vice chair. Seeing none, I'll move on to third call for nominations for vice chair. Seeing none, I will close the nominations and move on to the words. Christine, would you like to start with some words? There's something you would like to
I've
add?
already said words, but I can add words for sure. It would be an honor to serve as vice chair. I think, yes, you're right. We're a new board. It's a new beginning. And I think there is value in what has been learned from the past board. And so it would be my pleasure to bring that value and that experience to the vice chair role. And I know that Trustee Craig will be speaking if he's also been a trustee and has experience. I would like to that, I would say, I have experience in this division. This past year, as I served as chair, I have worked intentionally to build relationship with our division office staff. And I think it's so imperative to know that this isn't an us versus them, that we are not an opposition party to our division office staff. We are partners with different and very distinct roles. And I do respect the professionalism of this team, and I think it's imperative just to continue with that positive relationship moving forward, because I do believe that in engaging in a positive and respectful and professional way, we are able to move forward and make positive change and systemic change to our division, which I know that we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you. I do bring experience in leadership, having served on the Palliser Board of Trustees for almost 3 years. And that I was the alternate vice chair at that time. And I see our role as governance, and absolutely we work together with the admin team. But our role as trustees is to make sure that we have the checks and balances in place that ensures that decisions made by the board presented to us by the admin team are in the best interest of children. And sometimes that takes a little bit of debate and asking questions, which I think is appropriate considering that we all want accountability and transparency in our operation. I would hopefully bring a fairly as oldest person, having gone through a number of things as a teacher, as an ET local president, and knowing, again, I know people in other boards, we can look and learn from other boards, especially when it comes to our governance model, which should always be foremost in our minds. It should always be reviewed with the idea of how do we get better? How do we improve ourselves? And not in a conflict way, but in a positive way, which brings us to the desired result, which again is good governance, makes for good staff, which makes for good education for students. And so I leave it up to you as trustees to vote your heart. And again, I will accept whatever decision is made by this board.
Thank you, Greg. And with that, I'll- Yeah.
So I'll announce who the new board vice chair, and based on the vote, the new board vice chair is Christine Knight.
Thank you. And if I get a motion to this,
I so move.
and we need to vote up that motion. All in favor? That's carried. Now we're moving on.
I remember now, I'm destroying the ballot.
Destroying the ballot, yeah.
Right.
So now we'll move on to the approval of the bank borrowing resolution.
Actually, I would like Christine to speak to this, and she speaks eloquently about, the motion.
Yeah, so each year at the organizational meeting, the board approves to have basically a line of, a boring resolution to have a line of credit available in the amount of $500,000. And really, this is in case something happens and we need to draw on that line. And it's a relatively small amount because we do have a nice healthy balance financial position in the school division, but it's just that just in case. I mean, and certainly, and first have a boring resolution to have.
I need a motion to approve the bank borrowing resolution.
I so moved.
Excellent, thank you. Is there any discussion on this? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's great, thank you. Moving on to approval of signing authority.
Sure. Sure. So, of course, as any organization, we need to pay bills and sign for grants and whatnot. And so this particular motion gives, for the next year, the bank signing authority, the chair, board chair, the vice chair, and the secretary treasurer, or in their absence, the director of finance, with the exception that for the purpose of signing checks, the signing authority shall be the superintendent of schools and the secretary treasurer and the director of finance. And further, that the board authorize the bank to establish an overdraft lending agreement which is to be executed by the proper officers of the board.
So thank you. Move that motion.
Excellent.
Excellent, thank you, Andrea. Is there any discussion on this? Tyler.
I just have a question as to how it's worded. Just because it says, the assigning authority shall be the superintendent of schools and the secretary treasurer and the director of finance. And normally when it's an and on anything banking related, that means you need all those signatures required. Should it be or and or? Like, is there two that have to sign?
Yes, two need to sign, yeah. Yes, you'd be superintendent of schools, and or the secretary treasurer and or the director of finance.
Okay, I think they use that.
Andrew, do you accept that amendment?
I accept that amendment.
Any further discussion? All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Now we'll move on to committee reports and terms of reference. Sharon? Just read that here for them.
Right, so all of the committee reports and terms of reference, just for all trustees' information, were reviewed at the September 2021 meeting. And it's my understanding that all trustees would have received a copy of all of those reports and terms of reference to inform your level of interest in appointment to the same documents.
Thank you. And now we're moving on to the appointments to committees. So the committees are all in front of you and you have an opportunity to take a look at those. How do you typically do this, Sharon? We'll bring up each committee.
Right, and so the committees, of course, are in your agenda package and they're up on the screen plan, so you can see how many members for each committee would be members of that committee. So we go around the room certainly and have, if it would make sense, to go around the room, have trustees express interest. If there's more than a number that are on the committee, then certainly there can be a conversation. If necessary, there can always be a vote as well, but get that one of this one. But certainly a conversation around the table by, and we'll just go committee by committee. Makes sense?
So we'll start with the board audit committee. So who has?
Okay, fine, I will. I'd like to be here on the board audit committee, please. It's a rush of hands up.
So it shall consist of 2 board members, so we do need another trustee, so Craig, at full time.
Doesn't matter.
I was just gonna say it was going, so Craig has an interest in that.
Okay. Are there others, or are we good with Craig and Tyler? Good with Craig, okay, excellent. And one of you needs to chair, I think you're gonna, somebody like Tyler's like.
No, but would you like to chair? Sure. Hey.
Oh, there we go, okay. Excellent. Moving on to board budget committee, under Barry. So again, we need 2, and one of them will need to chair, so who would be interested in that? Christina, and Korean board, and Jenny. Excellent, are there others? Okay, so we're good with the 2, and which one of you would like to chair?
Are you willing?
Are you willing?
Great question.
Excellent. Moving on to community engagement committee. So I have sat on that before. It's a very to things about what's happening in the community and obviously the isolation. Are there people that would like to put their names for? And this is consistent too, but typically there's been problems with as well. So we will put 2 on the list. Christine. And another one. It's interesting when you get to actually.
You know, the chair can sit on these committees too,
I'll
right?
be, absolutely.
They just throw it. You're trying to sell it to others.
I know, I'll be on that one.
I'll try to sell it. This is the engagement piece that many of you spoke to, right? This is in the evening. It's as many parents as want to come, community members, and really at the end of the day, the board members.
And I think it's exciting, especially with the new engagement piece to our website, that I think that there'll be more discussion that will happen at this committee as well. And then town hall is usually talked about at this meeting, when we talk about what we want the topic to be, or the questions to be at town hall. And it's always the debriefing and stuff, the board obviously sees all that information too, but it's the committee that works with the town hall. So I would be absolutely.
I was just gonna say that I would be in support of the chair, to be honest. I don't think it's requested on the. I'm volunteering myself.
I'm great.
It's my understanding that the board chair is ex officio on all of them.
Yes, that's my
And so
understanding.
it's 2 plus board chair.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have Christine, Jenny, interested. You were interested.
I'm happy to.
Okay. And
Jenny, would you be so willing?
Good question. I'll do it. Yeah, I will.
and it is the.
Sorry, it is an evening meeting.
Okay, moving on to the division wellness committee. Is one trustee and one alternate. There's lots, when you look at the terms of reference of this, there's lots of policy pieces that this covers, so it is definitely a well-rounded committee to be on. You get to cover quite a few topics. Definitely see Andrea's and Jenny's. So it is, and Christina, okay, so we have Andrea interested, and Jenny, and Christina. So now we need to arm wrestle. So is there one that would be interested? No? Yeah.
So I will say, I have this one and the Harmony Convention as both that I'm extremely interested in. And I have been to remove my name from contention for this one without understanding the scope of the other one. Yes, that's right.
Okay, so we can certainly move to the Harley one, and the other consideration for that one, the one I was on, the division bonus, that one is a member and one is the alternate, so we don't go to. But we can go down to the Harley intervention committee, and knowing that Christina is very involved. Are there others interested in Harley intervention? Andrea?
I do have a quick question, if I can insert it here. If there are two people interested, and somebody is chair and somebody is alternate, between those trustees, are they able to navigate possibly tagging off on meetings and sharing the meetings? Okay, I just wanted to clarify that, so just in case there's an alternate option.
Yeah, and that was one of our other questions was, the possibility, at what point, at what stage do terms of reference be considered if there is a need in it for trustees?
And which one are you?
Well, just in general, yeah. Just in general.
Okay, yeah. And as a board, we can certainly look at those terms of reference, like whereas the previous board that were passed in September, but that is something that's good that we can take a look at.
And we have, sorry, we have, if something comes up in the middle of the year, we have presented to the board terms of reference changes, so they're not locked in for 12 months. Without you doing.
Andrew, if you like this on the you more to say, you're good. Okay. Okay, so Cheryl, just to clarify, for poverty intervention, we do this up front.
And the question about can people co-chair, I don't think that the way this is written would eliminate the possibility of co-chairing. If you've got two people who want to co-chair, and for example, both those people could meet with the division person who oversees that committee, helps at the agenda, and only one attendant. you understand what I'm saying? So Christine Lee, would I be correct in stating that? Yes. So if there is, so even though the wellness committee and the poverty committee, they one member and one alternate, if those two trustees would desire it to be so, they could be co-chairs and alternates. That would still fall within the practice.
Christina, I'm fine to have you on poverty.
I know there's other things.
Right?
Well, just following what Trustee Lake said, we could as a board, say in November, in our December, have an agenda item such as reviewing the terms of reference. If we have, it looks like a really engaged group of trustees, and it might be in our advantage to have more changes with more than one person on some of these. Correct?
And same with on the wellness one, where it's one trustee and one alternate, the alternate. Okay, so Andrew, I'm hearing that you're okay to take the name off of that?
Yeah.
Okay. And then
Yes.
Christina, you're good to be passed.
No.
Whatever you want.
Are we at
We're
poverty?
poverty intervention.
I don't think we've done a call
Yeah,
yet.
we hadn't done a call for who wants to be on that.
Okay, I thought I had Christina and Andrew both put their name forward
That was the other one.
for the poverty intervention.
So we had our names forward for wellness.
Yeah.
And then we went to talk about poverty and there was, ourselves and Jenny.
I haven't put my name, we haven't done a
Yeah.
call for poverty yet.
Okay, I thought I did, and I put both your names down, but that's okay, so we'll do a call for poverty. Yeah, we'll do another call for poverty intervention. I have Christina and Andrea and Andrea in place. And are you interested?
I'm always interested in poverty, but I have sat on that committee for 4 years, so I am willing reluctantly step back. It's a fabulous committee. It's really good.
Sounds good. So are there any others for poverty intervention? Good with Christina? Perfect. Okay.
And the alternate.
It doesn't-
There's no alternate.
For an alternate.
There's no.
Okay, all right. Okay. So we'll then go back to the wellness, the division wellness committee. And we have Andrea, Jenny, and Christina.
Yeah, we love him.
Andrea and Jenny, you're both good. Are there others that were interested in that? Okay, and now between the two of you, we're one to be alternate, one to be the.
Okay. I am a good So I'm chairman. Okay, we the chair.
Excellent, sounds good. So Andrea is the trustee and Jenny is the alternate. And then moving on next, I have facilities committee. And Tyler.
I would like to be on the facilities committee.
Excellent. Someone that can help the committee.
It's an awesome committee. It's a whole building.
So, what I would say, one of the advantages for me is I don't have a lot of time during the day, but the meetings in this one are pretty good. It's normally in a lunch hour, so that works. I don't know, it's exciting to get to see what's going on in schools. Fancy new things. We're building a new school. How can you not want to see what's going on there?
Do you go to on-site or the meetings here?
The meetings are here. The meetings are here at Board of Trustees. They're not on site. You're just kind of hearing about the different infrastructure maintenance renewal projects, things going on. Yeah.
I've never sat on this committee before, I'd be willing.
Who wants to there? Just hang on. Oh, sorry. Are there others that are
I
interested
get
in
to
that
see
committee?
there's someone else. That's it.
Okay, so between the two of you, who would like to chair?
I can share if you want.
Would you chair?
Yeah, I'll share.
Excellent, thank you. Then moving on to the Indigenous Education Advisory Committee. Definitely very important. The others aren't, but definitely very important. Okay. And I see Christine's hand going up their way. And Andrea's hand. And Christina. I need 2 trustees for this and Sharon alternate. Are there others that are interested? Okay, so I have Christine, Andrea, and Christina. They're preference, there's that's the name.
I did attend the first meeting last week, not that that should be covered, but I did attend, and I really did love this committee. It was powerful to hear all the things our division is doing in Warren, and a phenomenal job with this team. Building capacity and just being an inclusive spirit and culture, and I would be absolutely thrilled to be able to experience.
On the side as well, I think the team became quite familiar with Christine in that meeting, for that handoff from Doug James to Christine. It would be my recommendation that that relationship continue for the next 2 meetings for this year, and then let the chips fall where they may for the following year.
I can sit there.
So I have Christina and Andrea, and the one that would be like to chair. Excellent, thank you. Policy Advisory Committee. That's great. And Christina. So we have 3 of you. I can certainly tell it. That's right, somebody's looking at me back. I'm going to tell about my love for Policy Advisory Committee.
Bubbling.
Oh, yeah. So it's definitely a great community to be on. It's an opportunity to learn so much about the division and how things operate, and that's definitely one thing that really helped me. It's to really be able to learn and understand. So we do typically just have the one that's in chair. Do we have an alternate? No. Yeah. So between Craig, Christina, and Jenny. Jenny?
Sorry, I just had a question. I have a composition that says Board of Trustees, so this is on the whole book.
So the policies come back to, it's a representative of the board, so the policies always come back to the board.
Oh, I see. But the composition, this composition is an appointment from the Board of Trustees for composition of the.
Shared by member.
I was under the impression that the whole board.
I think it's one representative from each of those groups. So the group is the board of both.
Oh, I see.
One board of trustees.
I can withdraw my name.
Yep, and one from one division school council, one from the HTA.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
So we still have 3 names, Craig, Christina, and Jenny.
I'm willing to withdraw.
You're willing to
Withdraw my name.
So then Craig and Christina, we need to have
Actually, good.
The old Livingston Range, we used to have policies like this, so I have experience on that. I also had, as part of the Alistair School, or revamp all of our policies. I have like experience in policy development. I just throw that out as my experience.
Christina, you're good with that? Okay. And one thing with policy advisory is that all the policies come to us as a board. So we all do have that participation piece, and I've been watching the board meetings, there's been lots of times that on the at the board meeting, there's, hey, we want it to go back. So So as a board, we make those decisions for how pieces that are in them, so it's not that, you know, Craig's the only one representing us, it's that we all get to have the same. Okay, so Craig is chair for that. And then moving on to, Craig's there.
It's alternate order, it's also
Alternate.
oh,
Right.
this is the
Okay.
You need one for policy.
Well, I think there was one.
One and an alternate.
yeah,
One
one
was
of
under.
yeah.
Okay, that. Okay. And one thing too, with, and I don't know how the transfer will work, but I know for all the other groups that come to together for the policy is that the amendments and changes go out. So then when Craig does go back to sit at that table and have those discussions, is that we as board members can send him with, you know, as parents with decisions to the council, we can send the draft with what we want them to say or talk about or whatever. So even when he's going to sit at that meeting or it comes to the board table, we can send him with that application. And we know ahead of time what policy. Next, I have on my list is the Spirit of 51 committee. And I know I've heard Tyler talk about this. Tyler, you want to talk about it?
This one, I wrote this one, if there's a committee that was my baby, this is the one. This is the fun committee. This is where you get to do fun things. We do staff recognition, community recognition, all the people that partner with us in the community. So it's actually a lot of fun. And yeah, this is the one that puts smiles on people's faces. So in the division that work here and help us out in the community.
Thank you, and I see your hand is up for that. Okay, so Spirit of 51 committee, we do, are looking for two, and one will be chaired and we both actually. Andrea, like, that's pretty much wants to. Andrea? Okay, and others? Good with the two, and which one would like to chair?
You want me to share? I'll share.
Tyler. Excellent. Yeah. Moving on to
This
this.
is a pretty informal one.
Perfect. Moving on to the superintendent evaluation committee. So that consists of board chair and then two trustees. So who else? Right? Christine? Okay. Okay. And any others? Okay. So between the three, Craig, Christine, and Jenny. Who would like to maybe, yes, or who would like to spell themselves? Yeah.
I'd just like to say, just so everyone's aware, we can vote if there's one position and three people that want the other, in this case, 3 for 2. If everybody wants to be there, you don't have to leave. It would just come down to a vote, just like it did for chair or vice chair. We will go around and take a list who gets there if more than the recommended number of people want to be there.
Everybody wants to sell themselves. I feel like nobody wants to bring to it.
I think as an imperative, this is our call as a board. One of our top calls as a board is to hold our superintendent to account. And just, it's a great opportunity to continue conversations about how we can improve our division, how we can bring our superintendent to continue growth, how we can align, right, the vision of our superintendent to our vision as a board. And so I would absolutely love to sit on this committee. I think it really is a privilege to be able to sit and have those hard conversations and those deep conversations of where our superintendent is feeling fed, where she feels her strengths strengths are, and just in areas where we can continue to grow. And so I would love funding.
I mean, you're not a- I said I was in your packet.
Yes, I have been on it once. Yes, I do.
Great.
Yes, and I had the opportunity of doing, I guess, almost four evaluations of superintendent or two superintendents during my time. So I'm always interested in that. I concur with this speaking. It's a great opportunity to have frank discussions, look at areas of excellence and areas of what we should do, the superintendent to improve on, and then come to a agreeable situation, which I think I participate in that. Because so that's I bring that back now.
Thank you, great. Thank you, great. And Judy, you want to ask for it?
I am putting forward my name for the committee out of a willingness to learn and an interest to understand and an eagerness to be involved. And so this is something that stood out to me as a little bit different than the other committees in that this involves a process and an internal look. And I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of months trying to understand school divisions and how they work and how they operate at different levels and where we each fall and what our roles are. And so I have an interest in understanding this better and seeing this process and being involved in seeing how we are evaluating our strengths and identifying our areas of needs, further supports. And so that's what we're making for to be involved and have that interest.
Thank you, Jen.
I will, I think it'll be a good experience for getting issues on that board. I'll take my name.
Thank you. That's Christine, Jenny, and myself. PTA negotiating. So, with the ATA negotiating committee, so you want to talk about that?
Actually, it's Mike and Christine did on that, but certainly I'm sure it's exciting. Yeah, so I think Tyler's been on it before, to speak to that experience. I don't know, Christina, if you have it, Tyler, you can sort of speak to what that, actually, why don't you speak to all those committees? Tyler, and then trustees can kind of know what they all look like.
They're all kind of the same, except ATA negotiating, I guess, is a little different. We spoke before about how it kind of works with SIVA at the top end negotiating a lot of the monetary things, and then this is the leftover things that happen in the local ATA negotiating committee. So it's kind of like that. It's a good place to learn what's important to the staff in every case, what's important to them and what they're looking for, and things that they're probably happy with, some things they aren't happy with, they would like to change in their collective agreements that go on. So it's a good way to get an understanding of the people in the division and what goes on in every group. We've always had great relations with every group here, so I don't be afraid of anything. There's not anytime I've sat on it, there certainly hasn't been any contention or screaming or yelling or anything like that. It's very cordial. Really nice to get along, and so I think it's pretty good. And it is, I would encourage everyone to get on one of these somehow, get in there, and whether it's ATA or whether it's one of the QPs or whether it's whichever one, just to get in there and get some good experience, feel for how it goes.
I would like to sit on that because I've had experience on both sides of the table. One is the ATA and then one is a trustee. So I would like to sit on
Christine, Secretary of Trust, the question is
the board chair ex officio for all, no, they're not, okay, that's important. No,
Just standing.
it's done, okay.
And Tyler, you have been on this one?
I've been in all of them, yeah.
Oh.
I can go in, I'm willing to go in this one if no one else wants me.
I'm interested in either the HMA or the TIFA one, and knowing that I can't just as ex officio go, and
I would probably, if that's the case, I would probably stay on TIVA and go this way, just because TIVA is like a little secret society where they got everything, and they've got your names, and it's real interesting how they operate. The change there is a lot more difficult than the change here. So I'm willing to just go on TIVA and do that. If you're willing to let me be on TIVA on the other side.
are there others that are interested in TIFA?
We'll get to TIVA.
I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
before we
no,
get
well, we're
into-
not on TIVA yet, I just wanted to.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so for this one, for the HA negotiating committee, I would have myself and Craig at this point. Are there others? Okay, with that, okay. And one has to act as chair. So I'm fine with being chair, if that's. Perfect. Moving on to the QP local 290.
I'm just gonna make a comment. 290s are caretaking staff, just so everyone's aware, we're not sure which number relates to which one. This would be our caretaking staff.
I was gonna put my name forward for one, these are happy to do this one.
Okay. And this is one for two trustees, one will act as chair. Andrew, like, wait, oh, she's good.
Well, yeah, I would go on one of the two.
You don't want both? Okay, sounds good. Let's put you on this one for now, and then we'll see, I don't see anybody else fighting us for that. And one of you to be chair. Okay. Right, and then next is the QB local 2843. Tyler. Others? We're good. Okay. And for which one would you like to share? Okay, and then non-union staff committee. Who would like to know that? Okay, Steve? Two person, or that's two? One block. Okay. Okay.
This,
Go ahead, Craig.
just want to know on the non-union staff, what that will offer that include?
It's on the screen.
Mostly central
Right
office.
there, okay.
Mostly central office staff and a few outliers.
I keep telling my son the optometrist, so he's in the class.
Everybody, okay, so far I have this as well. I have Christine and Christina on this one. Any others? We're good. Okay, and which one would like to be chair? Christine, okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And the expulsion committee.
Expulsion doesn't have a
No,
representative.
actually, that's personality, if it happens, and then
Yeah,
it comes to the
someone.
trustees in this direction.
Yeah.
Who's available with that.
Excellent. Okay, so we will leave that one. Okay, and next we have joint committees, and these again are ones that I'm not. Okay, sounds good. So ATA working conditions committee. Tyler, you've been on this. Okay, others interested? Not in negotiating,
Yes, the ones who are not negotiating.
Yeah. And you need two. And I'm on the other one. Jenny's name's right. Okay, it's a way to get to know more about working in it.
Sure.
Okay, and we're a chair for that one. Sure. Okay. Excellent, so there was no others.
It's a good.
Okay,
Just the
and then city school boards committee. I see some hands here. So I have Christine and Christina and others. Heather.
I just want them to know I'm interested and will be coming back next year, but I will drop out for now.
Okay. Are there others? We're good? I'm not, I don't.
But only by the setting up, to be honest, my experience so far with this committee has been that it's pretty flexible. So in other words, if it's a meeting or an issue or something that the board feels that the board chair should be there as a representative, and that we've had 3 years before, right? And so there's not any real strict parameters, and so certainly, if the board chair feels that there's something of a critical nature in terms of what that meeting will be about, then the board chair has joined in the past.
I'm definitely interested, especially knowing that some of the issues surrounding the city, the link system with busing, and I know I speak at a school recently and some of these issues, so I would be interested to have people forward with the agenda, but I might have you two stand one of you.
I'm happy to set down first. Okay.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that will be Christine and Allison. Are you good to share that?
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Okay, and next is ASBA Zone 6 Executive. So this is only one. As you would assume, I'm not interested in this. I know that there's others interested potentially, so this is one that is not just.
I think it would be good if the chair represented.
Now, it's, my understanding though that if our chair is selected to a position of executive on the ASBA Zone 6, then we could have another representative. I've seen it, but I think letting some range into it. So, I would like to sit on, because I sat on before that I could put it to make sure. Hopefully she'll nominate the chairperson of the Zone 6.
Thank you, and then we can certainly deal with that. I certainly have interest in that piece. Excellent, thank you. And then Division School Council, I can't sell this enough, but I absolutely love Division School Council. It is engaged parents in our community, not that they're not all engaged, but it definitely is some of our most engaged parents that come forward to learn more about what's happening in our division. Typically in the past, there's been one trustee that serves, but we have also seen many times where other trustees come. So we did name one trustee today that trustee can come. And at this point, I think next week there is still virtual. So, and they know that all the schools will be there to the person, but that is awesome. We would like to this is January.
But if other people are interested in that.
So just like trustees, in the past, different boards have done it differently. Sometimes they've said, well, different trustees are recommend, but all trustees really are welcome to the meeting. And so it was, or sometimes 2 have done it, 3, there really isn't, this is the board committee and it's with their parent population, so I don't know if there's any and that was fantastic. And there's no, essentially, this is a business group to decide who does the report for the meeting and present it to the board, because we can all go, we all go every month and be social.
So is the agenda for the Division School Council given to board Parker?
It's posted online, so everybody can access it.
So if there's an issue that is pertinent to one of our schools that we're assigned to, that would be welcome to come to that division.
Well, we're welcome to come to any division.
Yeah.
School council. Yeah.
Okay.
Untitled Chapter or member two, and they would, they're Mondays.
They're Monday in the afternoon.
Typically, they're
Mondays
Mondays.
at 6.
6 Mondays in the evening. Oh,
6 o'clock is the educational piece, and then typically the meeting starts around 6:30.
Oh.
Jenny and. And which one is in more of the speaking and report, right? You're not really the chair, but you're that.
Jenny, what Doug and I did last year, Jenny, was we actually took alternate month to do the reports. And sometimes we would still go every month, but we just took turns doing the report that you were interested in.
Sure, yeah, that's fine. I just say one trustee, so only need one.
It does, if I just with us, with that, it being that it's a little bit different with every board.
Oh,
It's just
Well,
because that
if you
board,
wanna take that one, if you wanna take this one, I'm happy to just come with it. Or I'm happy to help carry the load.
I will be unable to attend the first one next week.
Do you want me to be
There
your
was one
alternate?
tonight, or I can make tonight, but not like.
Do you want me to be your alternate? Are we making,
Sure, yep, we can do it then.
I do that right?
I might have been a little almost now, but two. So division student leadership, so we have one trustee. This one. So you want to talk about students already.
And just, so you know, Christina and others interested, Trish is trying real hard to make it a little bit more robust this year. Of course, the lack of in-person has brought some limitations, but they're still trying to keep it open.
Is there other interest? Over here? You got it. Okay, and then T-Bot, so one trustee, and it's a secret club. Others interested?
Good luck.
to be that way. Do we still need to notify them if nothing changes?
I'll just tell her.
We're good with Tyler? Okay, Team Lethbridge. So this is two trustees, and it's. It is when it happens, it is great, wonderful, and great. Typically it's, for having some training at Lethbridge, there's some training pieces. My understanding is the plan is for April, when the spring city happens. Others, are there others? Oh, we got a speaker.
That is it.
Okay.
I'm gonna turn it off.
Okay, so next is the meeting agenda order. So, Craig, do you want to speak to your agenda item?
Yes, and I just forgot to add something. And I'll- here, as part of this, talk, I might talk also about that. Is that all right? Okay.
So I'll certainly involve the rest of the board members to see if you guys are okay with us adding that to the
It's a pretty weird law.
To clarify, to clarify.
I thought we did that before we started.
That was for the order of the camera. So this is the statutory guideline.
Maybe a little.
Oh, okay, yeah, add it to the agenda for sure. Yeah.
Andrew,
We gotta vote on it though.
Andrew, you're okay with that?
We have to actually vote on it.
Yeah. Right. So we'd like to make a motion to add.
I'd like to make a motion to add the, committee of the whole.
And is there further discussion on adding it? Seeing none, all in favor of adding that? Excellent, that's added. Now the item 9. We'll go back to the meeting agenda order and, right, go ahead.
I think, as we talked about it, I feel more comfortable if we have the in-camera portion come at the end of a regular meeting. And it would just simply be, we move to go in camera, when we come out, we move to adjourn the meeting of the open. So it's very, very clean and concise. And then it gives us a chance to talk, and if there's a number of items and it takes more than, half an hour or whatever, we're not holding the public or people watching TV, the live stream, wondering when we're going to come out. Because we would actually finish our regular meeting there, but we'd still have to keep it open because you have to make that motion in camera. And then at the end, you come out and make motions to adjourn the meeting. So, and I agree with Jenny in her comments. I think that would be a suitable arrangement for the new board. So I would hope that in our discussion we would consider that.
Are there other comments?
So as you envision that, what do you envision as the time of the public meeting? So just for me to understand, I'm trying to understand this clearly. You would want the public meeting first, and then the in-camera meeting, correct? So then are you envisioning pulling the public meeting back? Because right now it starts at 3:30, correct? So then what I'm envisioning as I hear you is we'll have our public meeting from approximately 3:30 until 6 or 6:30, and then we will move to an in-camera meeting after 6:30. Am I correct with that?
You could do that. My view would be that we would move up the public meeting, let's say 2 o'clock or 1 o'clock, and then just go till however long it takes, and then move to the camera, noting that we'd like to be finished by 6 o'clock. At best, but I don't see a problem with moving it forward. I guess is how I put it.
Okay, just hang on, I will. So I have Christina first, and then Christine. Go ahead, Christine.
I would be against moving the public board meeting forward, just for us to make that meeting. That's not the board.
And Christine?
I'm using a 5-second speak time.
Do you want to wait on that?
I will wait on that.
Excellent, I see Tyler.
Okay, I'd like to speak against that one, for the first reason, exactly what Christine said. As a board, we used to have a little earlier start time on the public portion, and we purposely moved it backward to 3:30, just because that's kind of when kids are out of school, people can start to get organized with that. It's kind of the earliest we could make a public forum, and still have people be able to attend it, so I completely agree with you on that one. The other issue that I have with doing it afterwards is that if there's information that needs to be discussed prior to the public meeting, and we don't discuss it till after, we're going to delay our decisions another month. So if there's a topic where we could discuss, say today in our meeting, and if we discuss whatever portion of that maybe in private first that needs to be there, we can have that discussion, sort that part out, go to it in public, make a decision and move on, as opposed to bringing it up in public originally, then figuring out, okay, well, we have to go in private for part of this because there's something that's sensitive there that needs to be done. And then we're going to delay our decision for a month until we get to our next board meeting. So that's the problem I have with that. So that's why I would prefer to keep it as is and do our in-camera first.
Excellent. Thank you, Tyler, for your comments. Craig, just to help us understand a bit more, I know this has been discussion on this topic. Is there, my understanding is that the reason you want the in-camera piece, that you want it to be part of the board meeting so that we officially enter the board meeting and go into camera. Is that correct?
Yes, and can I answer a little bit more on that?
Sure.
I have no problem in starting the board meeting at 1 o'clock and then going in camera. And then coming out of in camera and going into the public portion. So, it just to me, it makes it more procedurally correct that the standard is you go into an open meeting, then you go in camera, and we come out in camera and then we proceed with the rest of the open meeting. So I have no problem in whichever way.
Thank you, Craig. I think that helps just to understand what the intent was. And my suggestion would be for trustees to consider is that we look at, I know typically it's going to start with the camera, that we would look at starting the board meeting at 2 p.m. and do as I know Jenny had talked about earlier in regards to standing in camera time. So then we could go at 2 o'clock immediately into a standing in camera time, and then start our regular board meeting at 3:30. And if there were items that we didn't get to on that in camera piece, that we could move them to after the work. So there may be some months where like this month today, we started at 5 because we had more items. We can't start the regular board meeting at varied times, but we can certainly split up when we do that in camera piece and have that standing time from 2 to 3:30 as the regular. So I would put that as a potential option that still honors our family and honors those who are families that need someone to participate. And I think people would know if they came on at 2, it would be us just literally starting the regular board meeting and going to as a procedural. So that's open for discussion.
And I'm okay with that as long as we communicate to our public, because we have to publish when our public board meeting starts. Now we're going to be publishing the board meeting starts at this time. We need to make sure we let them know that from this time to this time, the standing, it's going to be a blank screen, or you're not going to be allowed in the room, so that they know that you're not until 3:30 that you're allowed into the room or into the.
I think that honors then the desire to make sure that this is covered proper process, that we have regular board meeting and then we have that permission to go into with an actual vote. For that, so just going back to you did make a motion. Is there somebody that would like to make a motion? Go ahead, Craig.
I move that we start the open meeting at 2 o'clock. And I would immediately make a motion to go in camera from 2 to 3:30. And that the public be notified of the direction of the board is gone, and so that they will know to come in at 3:30 on our meeting.
Can I make a friendly amendment that we would call that in camera piece of standing in camera from 2 to 3:30?
Certainly.
So there is a motion on the floor. Do we need to repeat it? We're good. There is a further discussion. Those in favor? And those opposed? Heard it? Okay. We'll pass questions.
Luann, did you get that? Again, we have Tyler opposed and Christine White abstaining. These are recorded.
Christina Larkin, you oppose as well.
Christina Larkin voted again? Okay, so 2 against, 1 abstain, and 4 favors.
So So with 4 in favor, that is. Okay, and now on to item 9.
Now, I think I'm supposed to make a motion first and then talk. Okay, I move that we, for this 21-22 year, we have a monthly committee of the whole. Probably the second Tuesday or whenever it is, but it's apart from the regular. So, and I'd like to talk to them. As new board members, especially those that don't have experience of being a trustee, there's lots of things that we can learn and develop. For instance, the truth and reconciliation. I think that would be a perfect time to have a committee of the whole, invite an elder from the reserve, from the Kainai or the county, whichever one, to come in and talk about the process of the truth and reconciliation and what it means, and then move on from that so that we can make informed decisions. There's other, and then, so that would be one idea. The other one would be just the curriculum. We can have that as a committee of the whole. So there's lots of ideas. I can't think of all of the ones, but I think it would be valuable for our first year to have a committee of the whole every month or every other month. But I like it every month, just so that we get a firm basis talking with our administration on things that are happening, talking about what's happening outside of the province and everything, so that we can make better informed decisions when we come into the board. I think it would be no more than a couple of hours or 3 hours. We can do it in the evening or whenever. But I think it's valuable for all of us to relearn something. And I know that I forgot a lot of things as a trustee, but one of the passions that I have is that I get to attend a couple of conferences where we actually talk to the person that helped write the truth and reconciliation report. And I found it quite enlightening. So I would hope that the board would look at it as a way of education for us and a positive way of learning more about our division, more about our programs, and not have to take that time in that public meeting where we can focus on some other things.
Tyler?
I agree with all that Craig said there. I just have, I guess, a point of clarification, or the way we do it now is we do have those meetings, and they're not quite every month, just because when we have some busier months, like let's say February, when we have the town hall, we don't have one in that month just because of different things. So I agree with you, and I agree they're very valuable, and we should be doing them. The only part I'm not excited about is casting a time in stone to do it, because what we've been able to do with those is make them more flexible. So that, for instance, that 1 month that we got that many things going on, we won't have one that one. Or it doesn't necessarily need to be on the second Tuesday of every month, because the third Thursday works a lot better with everyone's schedule in order to be able to get together. So I agree with what you got there with the committee of the whole and all that. I just don't want to I just don't want to make it rigid in when we have them, if that's okay.
I would entertain a friendly motion. Amendment, not a motion, an amendment to that. I think.
Other comments? Would you like to get that or?
I'm not sure how you amend the motion to be flexible. Motions are not flexible. Like we have it now and we do it, but I hear what you're saying. It's that we don't have anything written that says we're going to do this. We just are. So I entertain. Yeah, I'll think about it for a minute. But if anyone has some good ideas on how to word that, maybe that would be wonderful.
Sure. What the board could do is amend that to direct executive assistant and executive council to bring back the schedule to the board for approval next meeting, or to send out following subsequent to this meeting, to send, that takes that much to send out, following this meeting, that the draft calendar for committee meetings will be sent out, because we did always every year set dates, right, and then we just sort of negotiate those dates. And left it open that if something emergent needed, like if there's something that board members thought, we really need to get together and talk about this, that there's always that ability to add meetings. But we regularly scheduled 4 or 5 in a year. So so that would leave sort of November, we also have December. So we would, you say to schedule 5 committee meetings in whole, leave it open to add meetings, and then we could send that out to, and we could find out if those will be free. You could change it to having us responsible to send out a potential calendar, and then just let us know what, before you say that, given also whether it's evening or afternoon, what you're looking for that week.
Other comments? I think knowing that we have quite a bit of orientation pieces coming up, I would like to look at the change the motion that we commit to having a committee of the whole to show that education is important. I don't know that with doing the schedule right away, with us coming right up into January, the orientation pieces that can look at timeliness of some different topics, and that we commit to doing committee of the whole and having that education piece, and that we revisit it maybe, or maybe today that we are going to do it, but not necessarily nail it on the schedule. That would be my suggestion. Okay.
I can amend my own motion.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, I would amend that we plan to have in flexible 4 or 5 committee of the whole meetings when we feel it's important and when we have the time. And I would just like to ask a question. I know that we have a board retreat in March. Now, is that a possibility as part of that board retreat to have a committee of the whole?
I mean, certainly every year I work with the board chair and vice chair, and well, the whole group of trustees in terms of what that retreat will look like. Traditionally, it's been committed to your planning, where the board talks about the strategic planning. For new boards, I would suggest that would likely take most of the time. It's really committed to looking at all of your planning and your assurance plan, looking at everything that's come out of town hall, looking at and summarizing all of the public engagement things that we've done over the course of the year for you to take a look and set strategic direction for next year. I mean, certainly that would be up to the board if they wanted to add it, but typically a lot of it is the strategic plan.
Thanks. I'm leaving it flexible. I will make the amendment to the motion.
Sophie has amended this.
I just want to, Leanne, can you read back what the original motion was?
I got rid of
Amended is good.
You all okay with
The
me?
amended motion is to have 4 or 5 committee of the whole meetings during the 2021-2022 school year when we feel it is important and when we have time.
That's good.
Perfect. Okay, you're good to go.
Okay, so open for discussion. Tyler?
I just had a question. I wonder if just right now, remind me how often these meetings are already scheduled? For
Which meetings?
the committee of a whole, are we?
There's nothing that's scheduled yet.
Nothing scheduled for them, and so the process for having these is, we can remind what that looks like.
And we can create our own process for what that looks like.
If there's not any.
Are you asking what's happening?
Yeah, I'm asking what the current, I'm asking what we're changing it from.
Yep.
What is the current environment for you?
And it's, there's subtle differences every year. So last year, the trustees asked for, bring back proposed date for committee meetings as a whole, and then I think we ended up adding one because there was a need for discussion. And because it's always that flexible, the board can call a committee meeting as a whole at any time, right? Especially if there's anything emergent. But if there's particular topics we need to schedule in directors or coordinators or guest speakers or whoever that is, then we need the dates in advance. And so it changes every year because really it's a board opportunity to explore, discuss, learn when they want, however many times they want. So it's different every year.
And other comments? All right. Oh, she's, okay, go ahead, Tyler.
I would just, with the number, I don't think 4 or 5 is good wording in the motion. So I think we either say something to the effect of, we're making a motion to commit to committee of the whole meetings, or we set a minimum and say, we commit, as a board, we commit to at least 3 or at least 4 meetings per year, whether that be 7, it could be 7, but I think that rather than saying, well, we're gonna do 4 or 5, we either say, you just wanna say that we're committing to do it, because this year might be a little iffy just because of what you said with all the new trustee orientation that we've got going on through the end of the year. So I say either we somehow word it that we're committed to doing it, or we say we're committed to doing a minimum number of meetings, and if we do more, that's great.
Tyler or Andrea, are you guys interested in making an amendment?
All right, Craig's, he's got something.
Well, no, I would prefer a friendly amendment, but I wouldn't oppose that.
Andrea, are you wanting to and just not sure what to do yet? Yeah. Perfect.
Cool.
So Andrea, you can say that you'd like to make an amendment and you would like to have it amended, whether it's a minimum of 3 or that you would like to commit to having committees of the whole this year.
I would like to make a friendly amendment, that we commit to, less than 4 meetings of the whole this year.
That's great, thank you. Second person for an amendment. Good job.
What time you were friendly?
Well done.
And is that acceptable? as per the-
That is absolutely acceptable.
Excellent, thank you. Can you repeat it?
And we have that trustee Andrea undertook by the amendment to commit to no less than 4 committee of the whole meetings during the 2021-2022 school year.
Excellent. Is there further discussion? Go ahead, Jenny.
I thought there was value in keeping the wording that represented as needed and when feasible.
Okay, so would you like to make a friendly amendment to the friendly amendment?
I'll do it self-friendly. I will make a friendly amendment to the friendly amendment. To your
So
friendly
did you
amendment.
get that, Leanne?
We'll all be
Can you read it out loud?
Trustee Jenny Speed to commit to no less than 4 committee of the whole meetings during the 2021-2022 school year when we feel is important and when feasible.
I would say, as need arises and when feasible scheduling allows.
Thank you.
I'll read it again, Leanne.
Trustee Jenny Speed moved to commit to no less than 4 committee of the whole meetings during the 2021-2022 school year as need arises and feasible scheduling allows.
Okay, is that what you wanted?
Thank you.
Thank you. And you're good with that friendly amendment?
Absolutely.
Excellent, thank you. Any further discussion? Okay, so all in favor? And that's carried. Okay, so we're good, we're at the end of our, we need the motion to adjourn. this portion of the,
I also move.
Thanks, Tyler, thank you. All in favor? And that's great. So do we need to have a 5-minute break? And we need to be back here in 5 minutes. We need to start the meeting before public forum piece at 5 o'clock. So if you can be back in your seats ready to go at 10 to 5. Please start. Okay? Thank you. So I'd like to acknowledge that we are meeting today on the traditional territory of the Black. Thank you. So we're beginning the meeting. I'd like to look for an approval of the agenda. Are there additions to the agenda? So I do have an item that I'd like to add, and I'd like to add it under the board chair report. I would like to add, we received this trustees information from Public School Boards Association. I'd like to add that as 7.1.3. Are there any other additions? Seeing none, I have approval of the agenda. Trustee? And all in favor? That's great. And then moving on to approval of the minutes, so those were attached to your board packages. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get an approval of the minutes? Andrea? Okay. And all in favor? Motion carried. There's no business arising from the minutes, and we don't have any presentations. Okay. So, do we have time to start the policy?
We do start in the next class, so
Okay.
we can do, right,
So typically, when we do the policy review piece, the chair of policy review committee would bring each of these forward, and we have support with that as well. But we're going to have Sharon do that today, so I'll get Sharon started. Thank you.
the individual who works with the board person as chair of the policy committee is not here, so I just done that committee as well, I joined that committee, so I would do the policies before the board today. Most of these, they're very straightforward, so the first one that's up on the screen is school principal, policy 303.4. The changes that were made to this policy are changes that would keep the policy in keeping with the Education Act. So what you've got is, it says any, crossed out the previous, is any principal, vice principal appointed after September 1st, 2019 shall hold a principal leadership certificate. The manner in which it's stated in the Education Act is the principal shall hold a leadership certificate prescribed by the Education Act and upper certification of teachers and teacher leaders regulation. There's now a teacher leaders regulation, and so that just keeps it in keeping with all of that. And then the rest of the changes are really changing District to Division Act to School Act to Education.
Are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll need somebody to make a motion to approve policy 303.4. Christina? And that will need to see. As amended. Okay, is there further discussion? And all in favor? That's carried. And we have time to go to the next one, which is policy 405.37.
As you can see, the only change to that policy is moves from School to Education Act to the section of the Education Act.
Is there somebody that would like to? Andrea? Oh. Okay. You would like to accept policy 405.137 discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? And that's carried. to move on to the next one, policy 405.14, including consulting activities and services to other agencies.
Well, this was a interesting policy as the committee worked its way through it, because what came to light is there's a whole bunch of this policy that didn't like this policy that we're actually in other policies. And so the committee tried to clean this policy up in terms of making sure that we're talking about consulting activities and services to other agencies and not other things such as, regular and or long-term service, short-term, and all of those that really are guided by collective agreement and other leave policies. And so it looks like there was a lot done to this, but really there was just simply a lot taken out to make sure that the policy was cleaned up. And so really, what it's saying is request by employees, because it didn't make sense to say request by other agencies for us to give them employees. That perhaps, I don't know that happened at one time, but certainly what made sense is it's request by employees for consideration of release will be directed to the human resource department. So in other words, there may be times when an employee is engaging in a consulting activity or service to other agencies, and it would be that employee who approaches human resources in accordance with this policy. Approval will consider, but is not limited to, the following. The division can meet operational needs during the employee's absence. So some of that has to do with timeliness, for example. So let's say someone wants to do some contract work or consulting work, and it's readily apparent that we cannot replace that person and provide the service or programs and services to our own schools or division, then that would be a consideration. The division does not incur costs. So in other words, if someone is wanting to assume a consulting activity, that there's the cost of that we're incurring as a school division. A small honorarium may be accepted by the employee provided the work done in preparation for the activities done outside the employee's normal work day. Then there was some stipulations there about, normally we'll be 10 work days, normally this, normally that, but really it just simply makes sense to say when the division of school needs leave, and this is being done outside, if there's honorarium, this is being done outside of the regular work day, right? That is what sort of made sense. And then adding in, if the employee is receiving compensation for an external source for work during regularly scheduled hours, Lethbridge School Division, the employee is required to disclose this as part of the approval process. So a good example might be an employee who's works for Lethbridge School Division as well as another agency, right, or another organization. So if that other organization, if they're getting paid that day to attend an in-service, let's say, they're getting paid as part of that organization's employee for that in-service, it needs to be disclosed that that's actually happening, because then they ethically really can't also access the leave of absence that's paid from ours. So really what they need to be doing is getting paid by the organization that's providing them professional learning perhaps, as well as our organization. And so that's just sort of sound that practices and disclose if they're working and getting paid for that day by somebody else, they would also claim a paid personal leave as an example. And we took out grades of commerce and practical students that have nothing to do with this policy. And so, because that's covered, so comments are covered in an entirely different policy, so they were taken out of, as well as practical students are relevant to the policy. So we took it. So those have been corrected, the references below. If there's any questions?
That's really a motion for this policy.
I move that the board approve policy number 405.14, employee consulting activities and services to other agencies as amended.
Are there questions or comments on this policy? Seeing none. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. And knowing that we're at 5:01, we will move to the public portion. So the public forum, we will go ahead and have our first Cheryl with us is Derek Ressler. Go ahead, Derek.
Hello, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
We can.
Let's say that's good. I see my big face on the screen there. That's wonderful. Lovely to see. I just wanted to say, for those of you who don't know me well, I'm president of Lethbridge Public Local 41 of the ATA. I just wanted to.
We're going solo.
Oh, I froze and I come back. It looks like I'm back. So I just want to offer my congratulations to all the new board members and returning board members for that matter on behalf of the local. A couple things I just want to talk about. Just organizationally, we would love to have you at our Christmas dinner this year, as we do every year. However, due to COVID protocols and everything else, unfortunately, we're gonna try to have our Christmas dinner this year with our ATA members only, and that's no slight by any means. And that's a COVID decision, 100%. What we would like to do is sometime early in the new year, hopefully January, possibly have to push that back depending on how COVID goes, is that we'd like to invite members of the board to, all the members of the board to our one of our local council meetings as, and we've done it in the past, sort of a speed dating or meet and greet type of thing so that we can get names to faces and everybody can get to meet some of our members of our local council for sure. I know with COVID and the election, it's not ideal. Not an ideal way to get to know everybody, but hopefully we can do that in person in the next couple months. And the last thing I just want to talk about, and I know I attended the first of the curriculum sessions. I wasn't able to attend the second one, but I did attend the first curriculum session. And I do want to thank the board, I guess it's the previous board, but hopefully this board continues, for their work on the curriculum, the draft curriculum, and their opposition to it. Not just their opposition, but with some reasoning behind that. Many other boards refuse to pilot, and they use COVID as an excuse, which has some validity to it, but I really appreciate the fact that our board went over and above and put a thoughtful reasons why they disapproved of the curriculum. And I thought that was really important. I know when that came out, lots of people contacted me and said, you got a good board there for doing this. They were appreciative. That's from around the province, so I do appreciate that. That being said, there was this document that has been, I'm going to kind of show it there. I don't know if you can see it. It is the Professional Curriculum Analysis and Critique of Alberta Education's 2021 Draft K-6 Curriculum. That is a research document provided by our government branch of the ATA, our research branch. There was supposed to be a copy sent to the board chair prior to the election, so I don't know if that's still kicking around. It is online, so I will send that link to Leanne Tedder, and she can hopefully share that with you all. And it just details the issues that the ATA has with the curriculum, as well as a lot of the research, a lot of the surveying and all that goes along with it as well. So I do want to give you the opportunity to take a look at that and see how the ATA is responding to that as well. So once again, thanks to everybody for running. Thanks or congratulations on your election, and hope to see all of you in person at some point very, very soon.
Thank you very much, Derek. It's certainly great to have you on board and to chat with us. We definitely, I think I can speak for people around the table that we look forward to having that opportunity opportunity to have some speed dating with all of your members. That would be great for them to get to know us and us to meet some of them. And certainly the curriculum sessions are important. We will look for that document coming forward and we'll review that. So thank you very much for taking the time today and for all the work that teachers do. There's lots going on and we appreciate everything that you guys are doing and all the challenges that are presented to you every day. So thank you. Are there any other public board? Sounds good. So we will go back then to policy 405.15, employee research and intellectual property rights.
Of course, so this just as an aside, the document that Derek was referring to is already on our website. If you go to our public engagement webpage and if you go to curriculum, that's one of the documents that are there with a link to that document among some others, so that people can access documents, as they wish to for filling out the or feedback form. So actually, this feedback, maybe you can just take a minute. And this feedback piece, the curriculum feedback piece on our website, has been there for 3 weeks now, I think, right around 3 weeks. The last day that it will remain up is this Wednesday, because then we'll be trying to take it down so that I can synthesize all of the information for the board to take to Alberta School Board Association, because we've already done a briefing. Now to that briefing, we will add the current lens to that briefing to take forward. And so that's on our curriculum feedback website. We had 2 sessions for public, for parents and public to join, and although the participants were huge numbers, they were certainly really highly engaged participants for sure. The story I would like to sort of took it sideways there. Employee research and intellectual property rights. You'll see there's not a lot of change to this policy. It pretty much stays in line with the requirements. Really what it's saying is that if an employee does research or produces documents and is part of the work they're being paid for by the school jurisdiction, that's the intellectual property of the school jurisdiction. If a teacher, any staff member, doesn't have to be a teacher, if a staff member is doing research and development of resources outside of the regular work time and then a contractual agreement with someone else, then of course there's guidelines that they follow there. And really the only significant addition to this is we added in the use of student work as exemplars, because I know it became an item of some debate and discussion a few years ago when someone was producing something for a company and included that the school division student exemplars in that document. And of course, what we've got here is that that's not, that they can't just simply take student work and use it as part of a resource for ourselves even, or someone else, because there's certainly a strict protocol that we would follow to get approval for use of that student work. And other than that, the references have been updated.
Excellent, thank you. I get somebody to make a motion to go ahead.
I move to accept policy 405.15 as produced.
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you. Is there further discussion or questions for Bill? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we'll move on to the school board annual work plan.
So the annual work plan is really just the itinerary for the board members so that they can see. These aren't the only events that the board engages in, but these would be events of significance or pre-planned events that are already scheduled to so that the board knows what's coming up. And so really what we would need today is someone to approve the work plan and the work plan as presented. And of course, the work plan, like any work plan is never written, so there may be things that come up throughout the course of the year or things that get canceled throughout the course of the year. But this is the work plan that's really comes following your organizational meeting in terms of what will be here look like moving forward.
if I can have somebody make a motion for the school or part-time work plan. Go ahead, Christina.
I motion for the board to accept the school board annual work plan.
Any questions? Great.
It says in November that we are to approve board education plan and the annual education results report and approve the audited financial statements. If it's in November, that would be this week.
We actually have another board meeting in November 23rd. Yep.
This is technically the October meeting.
Oh,
We pushed back, yeah.
all right. No
And-
problem.
Actually, we would want the right language for that. It wouldn't be education plan because that's not the case. It would be approved board assurance results report. We can make that change.
Then I'm wondering, Cheryl, as well, when we just talked about the new role, we add that to the form.
Yes, we can. So ongoing, we would add. Maybe the whole meeting.
Are there other questions or? Christina, you have made that motion, you're taking this amendment? Okay, so all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Next, we have the health and mental health supports. This one is Andrea. You good, Andrea?
Thank you. I wanted to start by saying that I have a new trustee hat. A review set for Lethbridge doctors, specialists, and healthcare providers. With many doctors in Lethbridge, doctors are downstairs and practices home and are unable to take in patients, and we totally appreciate the position area. We know that healthy students learn best, but many of our students are unable to access services for health and or mental health. This starts to affect how well we need to in school. And so, further with the background, school administrators shared recently that they are seeing pressures on support in our area. Students and families are finding it increasingly difficult, if not impossible, to secure appointments and referrals to appropriate services and specialists. Their concern is the lack of access to health support and mental health support in the city of Lethbridge, and the impact this is having on the health and mental wellness of our students. Recommendation. It is recommended that the board consider if there is a role played in advocacy for accessibility to health and mental health services in Lethbridge, given the impact on children and youth in school.
Excellent, thank you, Andrea. I'll open it up for discussion. Okay.
I think this is an important role report because it affects the education of our youth. And I wouldn't mind writing a letter to the city, first of all, to get their support, and also to our Alberta Health Services Southern Zone, and to the provincial zone, as well as to our two MLAs and our MP. It may seem like it's an overkill, but I know that effective use of our time and letters does have an impact, especially if you can tail it on. And it wouldn't even hurt if we sent a letter to the Chamber of Commerce, because they're aware of this too. So as many people as we can, a letter makes a big difference in going forward, especially if it's united with other partners.
I think we also valuable to include in a letter of specific negative effects that this has been having on our students. I know, for example, today I had, we're having pick meetings with all of the administrators, and this issue has definitely come up. And so something as basic as prescription renewal, and students aren't able to access this, and they don't know how to get this. That's a significant loss of service. Yeah, so I think to have a broad idea of the negative effects
I absolutely support this, of course. I think that we have all heard this concern from, about physical and mental health. My only, suggestion is perhaps, consideration of inclusion of our staff as well. I think that's, higher than normal, burnout rates, among staff, and that teachers, they already face significant burnout rates, before public health emergencies. And so, I would certainly also be in favor of including, their staff.
I don't know much about it, but I know that TELUS Health now has kind of a virtual doctor that you can kind of get for delivering restrictions or something like that. So I'm not sure what the information is on that or how you access it or whatever, but I think it might be good for us to get that information, be able to just get it out there to any staff or students or anyone that doesn't know that, if you have something pretty minor, be able to do that, this is an option to be able to get there.
I have more than mentioned. I think we have to be very careful about barriers that present with certain suggestions or various services that are provided. I know TELUS Health is a for-profit, so the barriers for our families that you may not be able to pay. Public health, public education is there for all, and I think we really start to promote various services in the community that are for-profit. We really are setting a standard for communities where they are going to not be able to access an equal playing field for services. So I just wanted to also be mindful of that. Thank you for that reminder. And then I have Jenny.
I was just gonna add to Tyler's comment about other avenues that people are able to access for prescription renewal. I know that, prescribing rights have increased for, pharmacists as well. And they're able to prescribe a lot more things as well and get more services there to compensate for some that can help compensate for some of that. And just wanted to add my support to this and that in doing this as a board, we can try to explore ways that these services can be accessed directly in our schools, so that when there's some barriers to access, just transportation and things like that, if we can consider ways we can do this on site for some students and staff as well.
Christina?
I know Jenny will be my next question was, this may be more of a process question. When would be the appropriate time for a board to explore additional investments or action in this area beyond a letter? I agree. I think letters are very valuable. And certainly one important part of advocacy. But I think as boards, we also decide to look at how we invest and act in our own district. So I would be curious at what point that would come.
Not to be at this point, if that's what you'd like to bring forward, and I certainly would support further advocacy more than just a letter. So what would you like to, right? Annual June and the RCSD have been in very close conversation, as have I, with Alberta Health Services regarding partnership. So at this juncture, it's preliminary conversation. As we know, all social systems are tough, and so we know that partnership is the best bet that we have in order to create that playing field. But I think as well, given the limitations in hiring appropriate or qualified staff in the Alberta Health Zone at this time, it is tricky to find additional staff that are not there to come into schools to provide those services, but those conversations are happening. And I would provide updates as things unfold. Well, it was once the regional collaborative, which was a partnership between Zone 6 schools, health, and child family services, etc. It's now become, it was dissolved since. It's now the Southwest Regional Collaborative, right? So I apologize for using the wrong name, same bodies, but different names since 2000.
changing.
Perhaps, the first step now is the letter, and then perhaps we can bring the board, we can bring information back to the board. Where are things at? What does it look like with respect to that collaborative group you need successfully trying to secure some services? And then the board can sort of have a sense of what is happening in the city and among that group. So does that make sense? Before like, trying to put something together with that and bring it back to the board?
And can you tell me, I'm not sure when the next school board and town, the city joint meeting is?
I don't think it's scheduled yet. Okay. So we'll find out. Traditionally, there's one in September. November. January. January was canceled. Yeah. Until hopefully we're gonna get that. And oh, right, they were scheduled to be a new town council and there'd be a new school board. So now that, board members are, we'll move forward and contact the city for the date. But traditionally January. Okay, let's say that.
So I would just suggest that if there is a meeting, that we look at that piece as well, instead of having conversations with other zone six reps as well. Great.
Well, maybe one thing we could do, because what Jamie said, and I've been there where I haven't been to the doctor with a prescription, I do it, is that we could send a memo out to all principals, tell them to inform their students or their parents of that possibility. That would be something that we could do that's actually physically possible right now. I don't know if we do it or not.
All right. Great, yeah, our mental health capacity building group works in tandem with Kathy myself to circulate out the loop regularly, and so the principals are well aware. And even our mental health capacity group with their family support workers have infiltrated our schools to ensure those supports are there. Also in working with LFS, because of course many of our families who have barriers, they aren't picking up a phone and calling, and are perhaps even not able to manage determining how much of a change in a medication would be appropriate, or there's language barriers. And so, yeah, we have a lot of involvement from that level already. Thank you.
So Christina, knowing that you had wanted to add a pieces, are you okay with us starting with that letter? Please.
Yeah, no, but that's exactly what I was looking for, was to be asked for more information of what's already happening. Very aware that the work is extensive and more complex reporting, so I appreciate the opportunity.
I mean, I revisit it on our meeting. Is there a motion out here that you want to make?
Actually, I just wondered, should we wait to motion to write one out and start with the letter now, or wait till we find out what is happening?
What would be the right time?
Yeah. I motion that we write a letter to the city of Lethbridge, the Chamber of Commerce, and on the lead Sharon Phillips, and on the Nathan Udor, Health Minister Jason Hawkins, Education Minister Adriana McGrange, outlining our concerns for our students and staff around accessing health support and mental health support.
Can I make my opinion to add economic development Lethbridge? Economic development Lethbridge. Okay, great.
I have another amendment to our MP Rachel Harder and also Alberta Health Services.
Okay.
Can I add in our primary care network as well?
Andrea, you're okay with all those currently in there?
Yes.
That's okay, Leanne. Yep.
To write a letter to the city of Lethbridge Chamber of Commerce, NLA Sharon Phillips, NLA Health Minister
Education for Economic Development and Community Charter, Alberta Health Services, and primary care unit outlining concerns around students and staff, health support and mental health support and
Primary care network. PCS.
Is that Andrea?
Yes, I am good with that.
Thank you for making that motion. Any further discussion? Those in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So next is division highlights. So typically, I believe we go around and. Yep, that sounds good. So I will start with Christine, if you're here to, oh, yeah, go ahead.
We just went through a thing of just whoever wants to put up their hand and go,
Oh,
rather than putting people on the spot to have something to say going around
Sounds
the round
good.
table, so.
Christine's gonna start because she's done this before, so sure, perfect. Okay, highlight. Well, I think highlight has been gathering around in this room for the first time in the group and beginning our 4-year journey together. That is definitely a highlight for me. On October 22nd, GS Blakey Middle School hosted the Board of Trustees to say thank you for our service for 4 years. And it was such a thoughtful event. And I felt very privileged to be able to enter into the school to celebrate that way. And so they had 2 students emceeing the event, and they did fabulous. They live streamed into all the classes as part of their Fish Friday, and they told everybody what trustees do. They introduced each of us personally. Their dance teacher had students do a little presentation for us. We had some live music, and I have to say I did get emotional because I realized, oh gosh, I get emotional talking about it now. But it's been something as a parent that is there something as a trustee that as a parent, absolutely. And I thought, what a gift that I get to be there. And every parent has to be able to do that. Yeah, emotional. And it's been a long 2 years. And so that was definitely a highlight for me. You know, there's such a phenomenal job. Being able to see parents watch sport indoors again, like I feel like we're just moving in the right direction. So those are highlights. And hearing parents be so thankful for the opportunity to participate in that again. And something less emotional, maybe different emotion, but the curriculum engagement evening. No tears in that evening, but we've been hosting Touch so far, where parents and staff can come and just engage about the curriculum and the concerns that we have. And last week it was a really great conversation, and not a lot of people came out, but we had the conversation: how do we advocate past just this general feedback? How do we gather school councils together with the board to advocate and push for change? So those are my highlights. Thank you for sharing those. Who would like to go next?
I'm like Christine. I'm happy to get to know all of you. I felt really warmly welcomed by all of you, and then I had a connection with all of you, so that made me really happy. I was happy to reach out by email to my 4 schools, Westminster and Churchill, General Stewart and Kobe, and a warm welcome staff. I was able to attend the Churchill Parent Council meeting on Teams, and the teams were really happy about that. And I was so happy to see that those meetings were student run. That was really cool, because I only meet with little children. I haven't taught at higher levels, so that was really wonderful to see. I warned Mike that I was going to General Stewart Justice Ridge on Friday, and if you ever heard my cackle, you know it's very frightening. So I knew only that school could handle that, and the children were vibrating. I was there, so and to see wonderful things that we want to Halloween. And again, you know, I'm going to get emotional because I got students and their parents next week. Sorry. And I'm looking forward to getting out to visit all of my other schools. So those are my hopes.
I've already made contact with 2 of my schools. I have dates set up for their school parents, school council. But I would like to, I don't think I've done it yet, I would like to congratulate the entire board on their election to this next 4 years. I think we spoke well. And that we have a diverse group, and I'm looking forward to really enjoying our conversation.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yeah, my highlights for me in this very short period that we've been trustee has really just been to witness the hard work of the administration and of staff and all the families. This, you know, I real them, this everything has been going on for such a long time, and to get a very privileged glimpse into that work and how it continues has been really special. And I very much look forward to learning more about the committees that we've just signed up for and offering the skills and connections and time and energy to those and to supporting the very excellent work. I have a 5-year-old boy in kindergarten, and we got the costume on him and sent him with a pumpkin to decorate and a bag full of things to decorate it with, and he'd gotten out a marker and had me show him how to write the words for sharing, and he was so excited to take these things and share them in his classroom. He's crafting provided it. And I know that's only one son, but it represents for me a highlight I've been feeling that first 2 months into our school year, that we're seeing this excitement. And he went out the door and said, "These are the best days of my life." And he meant it. And it to me represents what has been a highlight for me, and that's been to drop off my kids and to see them going into school with such excitement and such positive energy and exuberance to be there, to come home still feeling full and energized, and to see that there's for sure a lot of concerns that we have with adjusting to COVID and mental illness and things like that, but there's a lot of positive things that we're seeing as well, and ways that we're navigating some of these challenges in such a positive way, and people are receiving it well, and I think that's been my highlight, as well as being here and learning very quickly a lot and recognizing how much I have still to learn and being excited to do that. So thank you to each of you for contributing to that.
Thank you, Jen. For me, I'd certainly like to say congratulations to all of us for getting on this trustees. Definitely a highlight to know that we have such a great, diverse board going forward into the next 4 years. A couple of highlights from what I've done over the last couple of weeks. It seems like a lot and a little bit of time, but was able to participate in the design concept built on the west side and meeting together with staff and parents at the school was a great opportunity, and then we were able to stream with the other schools on the west side to share that information. That was such a great opportunity to really get excited and have our parents looking forward to that. And I've certainly received emails in regards to what's going to happen with the new school, so I think that those engagement opportunities are there for us as we move forward. Definitely the Halloween has been a highlight to drop my kids off at school, to see so many kids, to be able to be expressing on and to be able to participate in some of the things that we weren't able to do necessarily, and then having their responsibilities. So it's definitely been a highlight for that. We will More highlights going forward over the coming weeks, but that's it for me. And then I will move on to board chair report. Sorry. Okay. Perfect. So the next thing is the division school council meeting. So that information, the dates are there for your information as report. Are there any questions about those dates? It does have to start time at 6:30. There is the education portion that starts at 8 or at 6. Sorry. Yeah, I just say 8:30. So it starts at 6:30. Educational portion at 6. I always tell parents if you don't want to stay for the division school council meeting, this is the educational portion. And I would say that as well as trustees. Always great information that the division brings forward during that educational portion. Christina?
Can you clarify what the education portion is?
Yep. So the first meeting of the year, the parents that are there, they get to decide some of the topics of interest to them, some things that they might not know much about, and they want to learn a bit more. Sometimes it's information that the division has to share that they want to. It's usually quite a condensed piece in that half an hour, so often it can be a bit over, but there's lots of information. It's usually one of the expertise within the division comes forward and shares. And over the last number of years, we've sometimes had students come and present the project they're doing at school. So it's just an opportunity for parents to really understand what's happening in our division and in a short, sweet amount of time. And they can tune in whether they want to come to the rest of it. And it's great for you guys to share when you guys go to other school council meetings and share that they don't have to come to one of the meetings. Go ahead. Is it online? Right now it is, yeah, and for sure November 8th is online at 6 o'clock. And I'm looking forward to see how that opportunity goes. I think that there's definitely a talk that it would, even if we didn't share in person, that there would still be that opportunity. And we've actually had quite a bit of good attendance with those pieces, just because parents can, for a quick half hour, come on from their home, they can get supper for their kids, they can join on, and they can still do things, whether there are activities for their kids, they can come on and have that education. And a great opportunity. Any other questions? Okay. So moving on, the Alberta Teachers Association local council meeting schedule. So that is there. So the first meeting is on November 3rd. My understanding is that people can decide.
Yeah, that's typically, Tyler, help me out here if I'm wrong, the scheme is you go through and you, for each trustee's pick a meeting, right?
Perfect.
So don't pick December because it sounds like we're not ready.
Yeah, looks like December, you should just leave alone.
And when we do speed dating, we'll have that.
And the meetings are typically at 4:13. 4:13. 4:13.
That's correct.
4%.
Here,
Date?
we're always up, right?
Yeah, the schedule's there. I'm not sure where it is.
These are Wednesdays. They are.
So is there time, a day that people are doing for quickly that you want that date? Not see any. I can start. I'll take them at the third. How long does it typically go?
Hour.
Hour and a half.
Okay, like we're not before 6.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I always do that. And sometimes, if you do need to step out after a while, it's good to stay with the culture. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. I can certainly fail for the okay. January 5th. Christine, right. Okay. February 2nd, and that is the day after our town hall.
I will take February 2nd. It's from home.
Excellent. We are ready to do perfect. Okay.
Do you have a costume for that, Andrew?
I have a costume for
I know.
So March 2nd, and that is the board's strategic planning day is the next day and the day following. So if that is a challenge for you.
I can take that.
Tyler's got March 2nd, April 6th. I don't know, it's a spring break calendar off my head, but that is our nearest spring break. Greg is going for April 6th. Okay, May 4th, Just need that. There you go. And then that leaves you for June first. So we're good with those? Perfect. And then moving on to PSBA, that's Public School Boards Association of Alberta. So as trustees, oh, yep, go ahead.
Sorry. Does everyone know where the ATA local meetings are at? Okay, they are at the Atwell building, which is, how do we describe it on the north side? Well, I guess we'll get an address.
301018. South is across from.
It's across from Hamlin Ag.
Hamlin, yeah.
That's not gonna help most people.
Yeah.
Can I make a suggestion to just streamline this moment? Yeah, we get to say, you know, schedule and the address of the other building.
What I've done in the past is send a calendar invite to each.
Perfect.
Particular date. But I think it sent some virtual meetings last year.
Yeah, it's virtual and they can go.
I just wanted to make sure people knew that it's when you end up in the industrial section, you go to the live meet, you're in the right spot. Like that's where it is. It's way up north, getting close to the Walmart north side.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Perfect. Okay, so moving on to Public School Boards Association of Alberta, so as trustees, we all, I believe we all received an email in regards to their upcoming fall general meeting and conference. I wanted to put it on the agenda. We are, as a board, we are not, as a division, we are not members of PSBA, but they have invited non-member boards to attend. An opportunity if we want to send a couple of representatives to go and put more information and bring it back, or we can certainly look at having them come and present to us in the future to provide some information. Well, or we can do nothing. So I put it on the agenda for discussion. Great.
It would probably be better if, because there's so many are new, that one or two could stay out, because it's right after our annual general meeting of ASBA. One thing that I did like about public sewer fund is that I felt that their overall their instructions, their meetings that you know, I can't think of the word. Professional development was better structured than other school board association. And so, I mean, I'd be willing to stay up there, but if someone else would have it, just give them an idea of that. I'm not sure, because I know that they lost court case in Saskatchewan, which they were supporting. So I'm not sure. Sharon, do you know what their view is now on some of the issues?
I can't say I'm intimately familiar, but I know that's certainly something that they work on for more than 2 years, time. And sort of that separateness of things, anything faith-based from public education is something they feel strongly about. And maybe it might be helpful to the board as well. We could give you maybe at our committee meeting a little briefing on this does belong to Alberta and the PSA, because it's certainly not necessarily inexpensive endeavor for the board to belong to 2 organizations. And I know previous boards have talked about that in terms of, but that doesn't mean that you can't access, like for example, their conference or the weekend basis. And so, you're right. There's new members of the board. Maybe we should maybe we'll just let the board know what is that organization about it, and it would be good to research right now what actually are their major platforms.
Right, and they also have this. I know that they meet in the springtime right after Asper too. So we might be looking at, because we also have a board meeting on Wednesday the 7th, orientation. That it would be better for us to learn about them and then maybe send someone in. It's usually like
It is in June after that. But we don't have our orientation on November 17th.
Oh, yes, all right,
So we don't have November 17th.
I mean,
And in regards to their piece with their constitutional rights, I do know that they did have a your case where they were collaborating together in some direction, but they do now recognize them and honor the constitutional rights. They have the separate with it. Discussions, Tyler.
I would just say, historically, we did send some people to, because every now and then they offer to go to try it out and see, like, we sent some people in the past. My personal thoughts with it are that I think the money can be spent better than spending it on PSEA. We've always thought in the past that the best advocacy route for us is through ASBA, and that what's good for public school children, good for all children, and so we kind of decided that our resources and time is better spent just with ASBA than it is with trying to split up between PSBA or another or the other. But that will remain to be seen what other people think of PSBA on there. That's what I would stand on.
Thank you. Other comments? Should we approve the information or do we want to? Yes.
I would just move that I move that we get more information and have it at a committee of the whole later in the year, so that we can maybe look at attending as a visitor this week.
We have that committee as a whole prior to the June. So that's your motion for today. Okay. And are there any questions or comments? Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Moving on to the associate superintendent reports, so business and operations.
Thank you very much. The report is in your package, but I want to highlight just a couple items in there. Of course, I was really excited at how the October turned out. It turned out probably better than we anticipated. We had very engaged participants, excited, heard lots of great feedback, and we got lots of great information that's been passed on for our review consultant for the school. So the new school is going to be in various stages of K-5 that was announced this spring. Is going to be built under the public-private partnership model, at least at this point that they're looking at. And what that means is the school division doesn't have the direct control over the design, bid and build process that we want to do. Infrastructure is not on the entire consultants. It goes out for a tender for someone to build it and maintain it for 30 years. So, but the one thing we are involved right now is in the design process of this school with the bridging consultants. And so we have been given about a year and a half ago some money from Alberta Education to start doing some planning for the new school. Knowing it was the #1 priority, it was a very supportive project. And so we engaged a consultant to start to look at what type of school could we build on that site. Because it's going to be a 900 school of full build out. It has the site itself has some challenges for that site school, and so we hired a consultant, got a wonderful report, and then we decided we wanted to gauge the community a little bit less on what they would see envision versus the learning spaces in the school. And so, of course, this event, 6 schools in West Lethbridge, teams of 5 administrators, staff members, parents, and a total of 6 that day were able to say they could join us. And so a really awesome opportunity to play with blocks and have some discussion on what the school design looks like. We had all that information. We gathered a lot of information on what like and don't like rules for design. And then, of course, the pictures of the end product at the end of the night. And it was a hard process. I was exhausted by the end of the night. So I was a facilitator, but I was trying to participate participate. I was with Andrea. And, we had, you know, a number of teams did, you went through probably six iterations of what you were trying to do. It was hard. So, but it was a really good opportunity. That information's gone through the consultant, and it's over the moon, excited with the data. My understanding, they were supposed to be on site either today or tomorrow, that they're touring, Hollis and touring Paxton as well as the school site, so that they can get that on the ground perspective of some of the schools we have. So that's progressing, and we are, you know, we're hoping that the school will open in 2025. The second item I really want to highlight for you is around, because there's lots of great things in here, and I can go on forever, is transportation. You know, transportation has been very challenging this year. We are continually working with Southland on trying to improve route timings, and we've added a number of buses and drivers. Now we're up against, unfortunately, provincial-wide driver shortage. And so, the actively try to recruit drivers, giving them hiring bonuses, particularly tax class 1 and 2, because that means they can get on the road sooner and quicker. There's 5 new drivers coming on the street today, coming out of training, so that's going to help a little bit. We've got 3 more that are going to be in the training process, so they're continuing to train drivers. And as you know, the challenge that we have is with COVID-19 is that if you have this little, you're not feeling well, you need to stay home. And so there's many days when a driver will say, I'm not feeling quite right, and I have to stay home, and they're holding on their travel. So part right now is we've got some of the route challenges, but now the driver challenge. And if there's no driver, then that does cause some issues, and causes sometimes it's double back and whatnot. So they do their best. We're trying to work on the communication. We're trying to improve the communication there so that we can get information out sooner. And I know Jared's been amazing at helping with that process. So it's continual. We're working on. We're starting to talk about next year. What can we do to make this a little bit better next year with some of our bell times, rearranging them a little bit more, making a little bit now it's better for some of the routes. So we are working. So that's but other than that, we're everything else is wrong. And if you have any questions on anything else, then I report it.
Yeah, this, and I enjoyed that. I was over at Senator Joyce Fairburn, and actually, the vice principal there, her grandmother was my librarian when I was on this P3 model. Do we get, is the architect actually hired by the provincial government? So do we get any input into that?
No, it's all done through the provincial government.
Yeah, but we would send to the, whoever's been assigned by the government to be the architect, we send them these plans, right?
Yes, we've set the bridging consultants right now, and so they start the design process. So in fact, they actually listened, they did come in and listen in the last part of the actual presentation, so they saw the presentation of this process, right? And they were very excited, they've got all the materials. So they've been involved in that process, and so they're actually going to, they're starting to use all the information now to start with what they call preliminary design, what the building could look like, some materials we have. And my understanding is that when they get the preliminary, that goes and gets shot. It gets also the process for the actual architect as part of the whole project.
And the other question I have about these rates is they own the building, right? And we lease it from them?
Yeah, what they do is the people who end up building it, the company, the conglomerate likely that ends up building the school for us, they own it for 30 years and maintain it for 30 years. And we then, basically it's in the agreement with one of these, we don't make these payments because the government's going to control that. And then at the end of 30 years, it can turn over to the school. We're responsible for caretaking in the school and responsible for the playground, and then we have the person that would be the actual fields and whatnot, but they look after it. Okay,
and just further to that question, Are they allowed to rent out the building? Because they own it, like at night or whatever?
Probably not, because we would have a joint use agreement, so we'll be working with them on, the government is well aware of our joint use agreement that we have in place with the city of Lethbridge, and that we have that community use after hours, so it's still our building.
Okay, thanks.
Are there further questions?
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have Christina and then Jenny, but what I'd actually do is I can extend the meeting. So we need a motion for that. Okay, so if I get a motion to extend the meeting past.
I would then extend the bargaining contract with all.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. I will go to Christina and then Jenny.
Is there information that can be shared about that on your page 6 of your report? Was the meeting with City of Lethbridge Transit, right, City of Lincoln on that? Okay.
Oh.
I know that's important.
Oh, for sure. Oh, for sure. Yeah, actually, that was, at the request of Kaylee King and Tracy Wong, and actually Maureen was there too. They want to have a conversation with City Transit about the city lease and the changes that Dawn and Busing made and how difficult it is for some of our families now that they've taken out some of the neighborhood runs, right, and made more thoroughfares, that's created some difficulties for our groups, and they listened, but they I don't believe there's going to be a huge help, but when
I think there was an education piece that was identified that, really that welcomed and Tracy, having the employees come out to share and to walk the kids through how they can become more savvy with the app and with the services. And so I don't know if that's happened yet, but at least that was I think it's a big step by the city to offer some support. So I definitely follow up on that in with Christine.
yeah, they weren't gonna make any route changes, but we could help educate on how better to use technology with the apps.
And Jenny?
I was just gonna ask for further clarification on the lesson as well. I heard from some parents wondering what we can offer to students who are waiting for their bus for 20, 30 minutes, in cold for the parents. That's a big thing, and I know that I got a regular notification last week, like this bus was 20 minutes late every day. And I heard the same from several parents, so I'm wondering if we are able to offer any suggestions or solutions, or if there's something to prepare a response for those concerns.
I'm welcome to suggestions, because unfortunately, Danny, the fact is that we have drivers that are sick, it's last moment, and so we do have the bus. One of the suggestions, make sure you're getting the bus app and you're checking it, because it will tell you the real time delays on when that bus is. So parents that are waiting, and of course, this only helps the parents around, obviously, to help their kids for the bus stop, is that they can see how late that bus is going to be, and then they can plan accordingly. But other than that, they're doing their best.
And for after school, are they able to wait inside school?
I would,
COVID restrictions with that, or?
well, there's some they have to watch, that to know what's going on, but I think when it gets really cold, I think our schools are pretty creative, and they look after it, so.
Is that something you're hearing?
It is, yeah. Well, no, yeah, I did have a few parents reach out and say my kid waited outside for 20 minutes for their bus. And I think sometimes they don't know the app might be good, they don't know how long they're waiting. And then I had a parent say, I went to Dr. Sharon after 30 minutes. And I do know that I get the notification from my kid's bus, but I don't know the rest.
Yeah, and if anybody's having trouble figuring out where to get the app, there, you can certainly contact Sharon and she can walk.
Okay.
Any other questions?
your hands and we will move on to
Well, the reports here in front of you, I don't ever like to just repeat or read the information that we've had, because I'm sure you've already reviewed the details. One piece I did miss to include was our anti-racism, anti-oppression meeting number 3, which our committee happened on October 25th. Really exciting work is happening with this group, and as a result as well, we provided an NPL session on October 28th that was very well received, and I think what's exciting about it is that a lot of us have really recognized there's much more work we need to do in working through discrimination, oppression, and racism in our system, and really the barriers that present subconsciously, whether that's in our practice and structures that we have in our system, but as well just in our own personal biases in how we have lived our lives. So that's one highlight I did want to add, and that I neglected, so I apologize for that omission. There is an important piece I think too for the board is this is really your first meeting, and what I try to do in these reports is provide a real sort of quick snapshot of the monthly work that we do. There are many other places that you can get lots of information around instructional services and the work that they do. I just sort of jot them down, and you've mentioned a couple already. So the school council ed topics are fabulous for getting some information or education on what's happening. The education to the board, so we really do make an effort monthly to provide a 20-minute session to you on what you have requested. Many of them often are from instructional services or in tandem with schools, but that would be a really helpful piece of parent nights. Typically, I work with Kathy Mundell and provide evening parent nights throughout the year based on things from the district school council and the ideas that they're wanting. Committee as a whole is a great place. This report, I do a monthly this and that, a little play on words, and I send out to the whole system. And what that does is it kind of does what this info piece does for you, and it's very similar, but perhaps a little more tailored for staff in the system so that they know what's going on. The website, I really like to know what the website is helpful for you, because I know that lens is really our public and our parents. And so if you go into division and then instructional services and click on those pieces, you can see all of our different departments and the basics of what we provide, and the annual trends, I would say. And then, of course, the board retreat in March, we spent a lot of time on instructional services. By then, you guys will be able to do the presentation yourself, but there's lots of ways that you can get more information around what we're doing. We've already provided a little bit of COVID synopsis, parent support. So monthly, we do get questions in our department around custody orders, guardianship, at home in class requests, specialized programming, high school programming, out-of-boundary requests, retention requests, safety issues, specifically around violence or risk assessments. Parents may have questions, lockdowns, and then digital citizenship as well. We've had a few this month that we've had to respond to. And then, of course, the COVID concerns. Cheryl, these are the ones that we get, but Cheryl also gets her questions and concerns. But we've made Cheryl an official associate member of instructional services due to the quality of service that we really want in trying to respond at very least within 24 hours for parents when they call us, and trying to be timely around that. Nutrition programming, we get about $250,000 a year from the province on that piece, so that's just a nice little thing for you to know. Youth engagement officer program, so we did have some unfortunate media coverage around some issues at Halloween, but our youth engagement officers were once called our school resource officers. They really are starting to target and support families and students specifically, as opposed to that one and bicycle safety or traffic, or so they really are wanting to get a little deeper and connect with families and students, and we have a tremendous team. They do some amazing work in our system. Within the Youth Engagement Officer program, Cheryl and I did meet with the team at the beginning of the year, including the chief, And he did indicate that they are going to put mechanisms in place to do some more data gathering and information, so we're excited about that process. Think outside, I will just remain silent on that one, but you can go online and have a look at that program. It's the second year that it's being offered and really supporting outdoor learning in our schools and increasing Indigenous ways of knowing. Curriculum and instruction, nothing's there. We do have wellness grants every year, so $25,000 part out to schools to apply for various initiatives in the schools related to wellness. This year, predominantly the trends are around enhancing outdoor learning and self-regulation. That continues to be one that I think people keep going back to in our system. Special bilingual program, Jody and I are going to be meeting with a consultant this upcoming week. Looking forward to that. The staff at the building have really already identified the professional learning and alignment with pedagogy are two highlights that they want to focus on, as well as international or national connections and partnerships. So we'll keep doing that. And then early learning, we've got 330 kids in our early learning program. That is quite a little bit lower than we have traditionally had, but of course, as we know, early learning is optional, and I think some parents have just elected to not register their children in early learning because it's not mandatory and it is for most a fee-paying service. But again, we keep on keeping on and providing as many opportunities as we can to support our little people, and that's essentially my review in a nutshell. Any questions?
A couple. Early learning, do they qualify for top or is that still around?
Yeah, program unit funding is still around. We have EAP, early ed programs, so that's services or programs that go for grade age 3 and 4 year olds. Then we have kindergarten as well. And PUP identification program unit funding is basically sort of like the old special education model. So we have students who are identified with exceptionalities through assessment. And those children, depending upon the criteria of whatever code they may be eligible for, can then receive program unit funding or additional supports and services to cover the early ed program costs, and then as well additional support such as A or speech language pathology or occupational therapy, OTPT, SLP, just to give you a few of the mnemonics so that you're familiar with them. So yeah, PUP does still exist, and so kindergarten last year was removed from eligibility, and they have since added it back in. So we do have that age 3 to K age group that is eligible for program unit funding or additional services.
Two more questions. I was excited when I heard the news on the UPA where it's going to be expanded past the hours of school. My one concern is that's a budget item that the city can control. And I'm hoping that the city sees the value in that and does not limit the funding on that program. But I think as a board, we be aware of that. And if they need to make a move to do something, then we have to respond very quickly. And the third one, and I don't know if it's you or Mike, home education, people that are homeschooling. Who looks after, are they looked after by someone in the supervision?
Okay, go. You're shaking it. Okay, so first of all, with regard to the partnership piece and the youth and youth officers, we have written a few letters already advocating, supporting that role in our schools. We as a division pay for one of those positions. Holy Spirit pays for a portion of another, and the rest is afforded by the city. So yeah, we really do value that service. It's a great thing for our buck. Homeschooling. So there is the homeschool. There are various homeschool divisions or schools, and Cheryl, you can tap in at any time. And so there's that vision or that system that is outside of our division. We do provide a very, very distance learning homeschool option from K to 8. It is very, very detailed, and I think the piece that Karen has done a very good job of, Karen, your curriculum and instruction director. She works in tandem with Nikki Cato, who has worked with, we only have 5 currently, 5 families that have elected, because the criteria that they really need to adhere to and follow is so in depth that many parents elect not to be a part of that homeschool program. And now with e-learning and other options that we provide in our schools, I think there's a more comprehensive support for or flexibility for families that are not necessarily wanting brick and mortar, but can have more flexibility and transition to something like the e-learning program. And I think we've seen some subscription to e-learning from some families that were in our division, but that homeschooling option.
So, are the numbers of the students that are in this homeschooling part of us, is that reported on our enrollment? I think, under which area?
Yeah, so in terms of students that are our students, not sort of an outside from the school, sort of e-learning students, that sort of thing, yes, they'd be, in particular with our e-learning, they would be show up in the Black student total, the Senator Joyce total, and the LCI total. And then in terms of some of the other distance learning, those sorts of things, Victoria Park, they would show up there, and then LCI has a program as well. So.
And my final question. This was actually when I was campaigning, and one of the parents asked me, she homeschools her kids, but wondered if there was a hybrid program that could be adopted, where a parent, and I don't know if they do or don't, but a parent could say homeschool their kids for certain things and then go to a regular school for something else, like this ed or something like that. And I just know how to answer that. So
I think Cheryl's one.
yeah, if I could get some information on that, that'd be great.
You betcha, and it part of it becomes what the student would be coded at. And so there is such a thing as blended. Where it gets complicated is when a parent doesn't want to follow the Alberta program of studies, but wants to have access to school extracurricular, co-curricular, or option programs. Most of our, to qualify for blended, and first get classified as a blended program, the parent then would be willing to follow the Alberta program of studies, and we would deliver that using the scale, using a blend, and we do have blended. So where that delivery is blended, following the Alberta program of studies, just learning materials and that type of thing, blended in with the school. So that student really becomes almost like a full-time student, regular student, except for the blended program. That's not possible if the student is not following the Alberta program of studies. And so what they get classified as and the amount of funding for that certainly doesn't allow for or permit the capacity of the school division to begin to welcome that potentially very large population into our schools for option programming, because we wouldn't have any of the even with the way moving out, we wouldn't have any of that funding to support teacher delivery to those students. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, it does, and thank you for taking the time to answer this question. Just need to have some clarification. Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions? I have a question, I don't believe it's in there, in regards to the announcement last week to the additional funding. Can you share with us how that impacts our decisions and our schools?
Right here. And so, this was, first I just want to say thank you to a number of people who did this extraordinary amount of extra work for them. Teachers have a lot in their classrooms, the grade 2 teachers had to implement their assessments, so that Karen and the teachers could put all of that together and qualify for the funding. So we did qualify for the funding, And the total was $439,530 for funding for what we're calling boost, what the province calls COVID gap intervention funding. And so right now, this week, now that we know how much money we have, Sharon, our curriculum director, is working with the teachers and she has a committee also of administrators and teachers to put together the final details on the intervention program. The vision of our intervention program is that it will be teacher delivered. Right? Some jurisdictions are going with assisted, but we want teacher delivered intervention programming, and of course the distribution of that teacher time for numeracy and literacy based on the assessments, of course, that happens. There will be further assessments and funding for grade 1 in January. So January there'll be a round of assessments for grade 1 students, and then the province will distribute funding according to what the assessment results are there. Any questions?
Is that's for grade 2 and 3 then?
Yes, this is for grade 2 and 3.
See that, thank you, Lori, and the additional comments. I will actually go over this.
Sure, I'll just give you a couple of highlights on the report. We'll probably spend a majority of the time on enrollment, but sure, certainly let me know if you have any questions. In terms of the first part, as you can see, hiring is ongoing. We have busier times of the year for teachers. The spring tends to be pretty busy for hiring. For support staff, non-teaching roles, end of spring and into the fall tend to be pretty busy. But as you can see, there's always plenty going on. As always, we have challenges adding support staff members to our support staff sublist. That one can be a little tricky. In terms of other highlights, probably the only one that I really wanted to highlight was we've been involved in assurance plan meetings with each of the schools. That's really an opportunity for the schools to, for lack of a better term, brag about all the good things that are happening in their schools. And it's been just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to hear what's going on, all the good things happening in schools. So really been enjoying that. In terms of the enrollment, that's just a general summary there. We're going to get into the specifics in the second here. And then obviously COVID is like everybody in education, it consumes a large portion of our professional experience, that's for sure, and certainly for all of us in our personal lives. I'll talk a little bit about enrollment. And again, if you have questions, just let me know. I won't try and go through every single school, but I'll hit some of the highlights for you. But if you've got a question about a specific school, just let me know. So as you can see, we did have an increase in our enrollment. We're going to start off with the K-12 enrollment. So if you could guess, just scroll down. Thank you. So a few things to know. First, I'll just go through the schools and then I'll talk kind of big pictures. Just to give you a sense, so you look at Coalbanks, for example, and it was down 20 students. Coalbanks is a growth area. That's a result of the boundary changes. We had to get the population under control there. We just wouldn't have been able to house all the kiddos. So that worked kind of the way we thought it would. Dr. Robert Claxton, obviously our new school. So, you know, it's gone up by 403 kids because it didn't exist previously. If you look at Dr. Crowley, there's another example of a school that was really, really full. And the boundary change was designed to slow that growth down and even get a few kids out of the building so they had a little more room there. As you can see, it was successful. I'm going to scroll down to Galbraith where they're at -51. We're not certain that that's anything to do with the boundary changes. It seems like it's a bit of a demographic thing. It's a bit of a trend that's been happening for a few years. So I don't think that's boundary related, but it's something that we'll definitely keep an eye on and see if that trend reverses itself. If you look at Lakeview and you see -133, that's just because a lot of the Lakeview students end up in the Dr. Claxton catchment. Nicholas Sharon, you'll see -100 students, and that's just a move of French immersion over to Coalbanks Davidson, and then students from the west side coming in and sort of that. So that was to be expected. And if you look at our elementary overall, if you go to the sort of that green row there, at the start of the kindergarten, a couple little trends for you to be aware of. First of all, you can see kindergarten is 747 students. If you look at that green row, it's the smallest number of all of those grades. We believe that's primarily a COVID issue, in that for many kids, they don't have to go to kindergarten, so there's some trepidation to send kids into kindergarten with COVID still being an issue. So last year, we were about 735 kindergarten kids. And so as you can see, this year, we regained those kids going into grade 1. So we went from 735 in kindergarten last year to 837 in grade 1. So that was, we were happy to see that. That means our kids are coming back. It created some staffing challenges for us in the grade 1 initially. We had to put some more teachers in some cases, put some half teachers in to provide some additional support, but we were able to do that. So overall, elementary compared to 2020, we're up about 151 students. If you look at the middle schools, you can see the growth is pretty similar with each school. It's pretty uniform. The one thing to just be aware of, if you look at, again, that green row and the grade 7 total, it's a little bigger than the other ones. Every now and then we just get a blip that comes through a large group or a small group. So there's a bit of a large bubble that will continue to work its way through the system. It creates a bit of issues for us in terms of staffing, and sometimes hard to get the classes right and staff it correctly, just because you've got a bubble that isn't the same as the other grades. So it makes it a little tricky, but that happens in education. In terms of the high schools, probably the one that jumps out the most is LCI increase of 164. That's due to two things. One, the boundary changes. And then other, they just had a pretty large group coming into grade 9. Some of that is due to the boundaries. Some of that is just due to a bigger bubble. So, some work that had to be done there. That's certainly good to see LCI getting built back up. And you'll see Chinook went down by 34 students. Again, that's a boundary change, and the reason for that is Chinook was bursting at the seams. They're pretty much at their capacity, and so whereas LCI isn't anywhere near its capacity, so certainly that worked there. And as I mentioned earlier, Victoria Park, don't be alarmed by the -31. In the past, they've just used a placeholder for enrollment for Victoria Park because they're a continuous intake, and those numbers that we have here are actual real numbers, but certainly we expect they'll go up through the course of the year, and Victoria Park's always pretty busy. So K-12 up 316 students, right about where we thought. We're pretty close to where we thought we would be. And just really good to see our kids coming back after COVID. That was the biggest part. It's pretty hard to talk to many schools that weren't excited to see their kids back, and especially those kids who were in home learning for a lot of the year. That was pretty awesome to see. Now we'll just take a quick peek at the early learning. So that's again our sort of total enrollment, and everything's the same except for we add in the pre-K and the preschool. And those numbers are certainly down. Preschool is about the same. I think last year was 20. Pre-K was up over 300 last year and is a little bit lower. And again, that goes back to the COVID experience where there's a number of parents who just choose not to send their children to the early learning programs. But otherwise, all the numbers in there. And so that's the enrollment report. A few questions on anything?
Great.
On the enrollment, and this is a good picture. And I don't need the answer now, but maybe at our November meeting. What is for each of these schools now? Some have dropped, some have increased. What is the percentage of capacity in each of those schools? Is that easy to figure out? And so in November we can get up at our board meeting and okay.
Yeah, Christine can provide that. Yeah. All right.
Other questions?
And I really like when the questions give Christine some work to do.
More comments. Okay. I just wanted to sort of make a comment into the group for our perspective on the PK and K as well. That just as a reminder to trustees that it's not always about parent choice that they can't attend. And I know that you know that. It's just sort of to speak it into the public. That families with children under 5 have faced significant barriers to accessing public institutions in the last 2 years and continue to face it in terms of changing funding and earlier funding and I look forward to discussions as a board about how we can support early year education and address some of those missing kiddos, because we know that they're out there and would love to know.
Yeah, and I can tell you our principals were, and continue to, get as many kids re-engaged as possible. Kids across the system, and they worked hard, obviously, up to September 30th, but they continue to work hard. And they're not knocking on my door to get additional funding, that sort of thing. They just want those kiddos back. So, yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good piece, because I think sometimes our trustees forget our early education program for 3 and 4-year-olds is a service we do this before. They don't just get it for free unless we have programming and funding in place. So they would need to be identified with exceptionality before that fee is covered. And so if you think about that, right, it does present challenges when you say, $175 a month or sorry, $185 a month. That has to be paid. There are many families that cannot afford that amount to start with, to get in, to get identified. And Alberta Health Services has restructured their identification process for exceptionalities now as well. So systemic areas for sure are presenting and are in place. We do get creative.
Sorry, and then an actual question for preschool, I probably with the changes to preschool eligibility for Alberta Child Care Subsidy, does that impact registration and pass applicability within our district, or? Okay.
Thank you, Mike. And moving on to our next, I have a public forum response. Are you okay to talk about the response? That's okay, and I can certainly get Sharon to do it. It's just my signature. Yep.
Yeah, I do. Thank you. And so the typical practice is if there is a public forum presentation, then following that, there is a response from the board. And so I worked with the Christine Light on the draft that was sent out to all the trustees. The trustees look at it, give feedback, and then that is given in written format to the individual and put in the next board agenda. So if there for trustees and the public to see their response to the public forum presentation, if there's any questions.
Are there any questions? Okay, sounds good. We will move on to the next item, which is superintendent's report.
All right, so the board priorities report. The purpose of this report is for trustees and your community. The way it's organized is that it basically gives all of the assurance domains, right? That is under the new assurance model that we're going to be using it for. And under those domains, it gives you all the things that have been happening. So this is really system accountability to you and system accountability to public. So if you get, I don't know, if you get questions about what's happening in the division, refer them please to the board priority report. These are the board priorities that were established in the assurance plan. And you'll be working on an assurance plan when you do strategic planning this spring. So this is organized, if you look at the first page, the division domains and priorities for 2020. So yeah, I've got it there. That gives you what the domains are. And those domains are domains that the province has provided to structure assurance planning and reporting. Those are the domains. So there's the domain. And then everything that happens within those domains, then we update monthly. So every month you'll have what's called, just if you go to the next page, it's exactly here, the report to the board. And so, for example, everything that's, we forget some things too, but all of the managers contribute to this report. So Maury, directors, and Maury herself
Christine and Christine's directors, Mike and Rhonda, myself, we contribute to this report monthly for the board because we like to keep you apprised of all the work that's getting done to address the priorities that the board have identified. So it's fairly comprehensive, and it really does keep us accountable to you, accountable to the public, accountable to ourselves in terms of what is the actual work we're doing, is what we're doing actually addressing the priorities that have been established by the board. And so under governance, for example, we enable with stakeholders. It will give, people say, well, what are you doing for stakeholder engagement? That's there for you, and it's updated every month. Same as what are we doing with other school authorities, municipalities, community agencies. Certainly that's there. So I don't typically read through this with the board because it's a lot of information. And so I'm hopeful this gives you a really good sense, especially a really good sense of what is the work, right? Because always the, it's about what is the work, what is it that is happening in school? What is it that's happening for children? What is it that's happening with our partners? So all of those things are in this report for you. And then of course, I always ask, well, and are there questions then that the trustees had? Because it's a very lengthy, it's not always this lengthy. Beginning of the year is lengthy, or we're launching a number of new things. But we do update this every month so that you can see that we're giving ongoing attention and our due diligence to all of the priorities that have been established by the board. And so your domains, governance really is about connecting with community, connecting with your partners. And then we have the student growth and achievement. That's the big, right, for the most part, because that's all of the things that we're doing for student growth and achievement, including innovation. And so then we have teaching and leading. That's all about what are we doing to build the capacity of our staff? What are we doing for professional learning? What are we doing across all of our different employee groups? And what are we doing to ensure that we've got the kind of quality delivery of services and teaching to our students in our schools? And of course, inclusion is another domain. What is it that we're doing to make sure that we maintain an inclusive learning system and support our schools in so doing? And if there's ever any questions in that, I certainly welcome them. I think if you don't have them at the board meeting, if you see something and want to know more about it, just give me an email and then I can connect with whatever associate superintendent oversees that area or myself and provide you with the response. So, any questions?
Next is donation.
Right, so at this point, at the end of my board priorities report, I also take some time to review because the COVID discussion guides with the board. Now, we won't spend a lot of time discussing just what the admin put that up on. Sure, yeah, I should ask that again. Put up on the screen because what we do with the board discussion guide, COVID-19 discussion guide, is then we take this information, we do a summary that goes on our website. Not everything that's in here, not all the charts, got anything that's sort of copyright proof doesn't get transferred over. So in other words, some of the still have a link. So some of the charts, graphs, whatever that are in here would be linked instead. And so just wanted to, just in case there was questions from trustees, in case you get questions from your public, just wanted to cruise through that document. What's up over here? All right, we got it. All of the slides. All right, so the first chart, that's the Alberta Health data regarding variants. And so this process each is pretty straightforward information really, because it really goes from provincial to local to our school information, right, for trustees to take a look at. So page 3, yeah, oh, I can't see. So the AFAA guidelines, those haven't changed for a long time. Alberta's AFAA guidelines
Alberta School Athletic Association, is what ASAA is. And so in terms of the schools and athletics, and school sports practices, those things haven't changed. Their guidelines have been pretty much standard since last spring. If you are interested as a trustee, if you have parents seeking guidance on what's happening with athletics and other activities, when you go to our website, there is the re-entry guide. There's also a co-curricular, extracurricular phase in plan, right? And that's been updated as well as our re-entry plan to reflect up to November 1st, all activities, right? And so if you've got members of the public or yourself, you want to go take a look at that chart, you'll see where we're at with respect to athletics. Any questions there? Yeah.
Just to represent some of the feedback from the public, just for back to the COVID bit. As I mentioned earlier, there's a request to know names of those involved in receiving negative COVID testing.
So to know the names of the individuals or the classes?
They just wanted, I'm just getting feedback from the public wanting to know who at our division offices is involved in collecting that information.
Just the 3 people in HR that.
Oh, for the vaccination, I thought you meant COVID case, sorry.
No, the negative test results for
Those
people who are unvaccinated.
Oh, that would be an HR question. Right?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were saying COVID. Sorry.
No, we're in COVID, and that would be, COVID and vaccination. So this would be sort of the students, so there's the notification and reporting of positive COVID.
Right. Yeah.
But then there's also the
staffing issue.
Right, which would be, Mike, if you want to respond to how our staff reporting what they need to report under our new guidelines, so the vaccination procedure.
We have 3 staff members right now that are responsible for that. Katie Gioni, Jolene, Bruce, and Stacy, because they all work in the HR department. We have a member who's away right now, will be coming back, Amber Wade, and she will be involved as well. She will probably take over for Stacy, but it's always good to have one extra person in case somebody's sick, that sort of thing. And then myself and Director Rhonda Oss would have access. We don't have access to the email account, but we do have access to the summary of the information in case there's questions about replacements.
And what is being emailed in with the results from the pharmacy? Are they coming from the pharmacy or from the individual?
From the individual.
Thank you.
So, just as a summary, because I know that's usually the biggest question you get as well, but the athletics and participation, as I mentioned, in terms of our outdoor sport and recreation activities, we have the restriction exemption program in place, and that's well for our secondary schools. We've just started down the path of our indoor sport and recreation with volleyball league games. That's gone very well. Schools are starting to look at other small number events where they can have what's called sort of controlled entrance. In other words, they know what students are coming, they can figure out how many spectators that each student would have to keep the capacity of the facility to 1/3. And so they're moving in a positive direction here. And then I think that's reflective if we take a look at the graphs that are on page 4 and 5. We're really hopeful, I know schools are very hopeful that these trends will certainly continue because we've got the active cases. Of course, you've got your major cities on page 4, including Lethbridge. The trend is looking positive, certainly. And then on page 5, we have our multi-day trend for Lethbridge, again looking positive. And our 4-week trend, data counts for Lethbridge is, there's spikes here and there, but overall, the line is looking positive. We've got the
So I'm on page 6 now. The total number of cases increasing or decreasing in Lethbridge, while they're starting to decrease. Certainly, as we know, we saw a spike at the end of, as we start to move our way through August. And a lot of nervousness at the beginning of the school year, certainly in terms of what would COVID, the implementation of COVID protocols look like in school. And so there's questions there, certainly. Is there any known diagnosis in any schools? And so the second most significant question that parents ask, the number one is sort of it, not number one of the frequently asked questions about sports recreation activities. The second is about notification. I know there was, there was a lot of discussion among parents and confusion and exasperation, and I don't blame parents at the beginning of the school year because, well, why is it that elementary are getting these specific notifications to the class, and that's not happening in past grade 6, grade 7 to 12, where it was only a school notification without identifying class. That changed when I sent out the letter October 13th or 14th in terms of notification. We met with superintendents, met with the deputy minister and Alberta Health Services, and clarification was brought to the table in terms of what that looks like across all grades. And so grades K to 12, there's notification to the entire school community, and in that notification identifies the cohort class, or secondary, it might be classes at a high school or middle school, as well as any clubs or groups at a secondary level that may involve.
And buses.
And buses, or yes, and buses are as well. And so, in addition to that, parents can go to the provincial website, which is linked to our plan, that shows sort of the total cases for school and sort of an ongoing track over the course of 14 days, Lauren, before schools drop off the radar for each. No, 28 days. Oh, it's 28, that's right, that's for a long time. And so those are commonly asked questions. Again, on page 8, often, we'll be asked what sort of implications for staff, how are we doing, how are we doing with illnesses, how are we doing with substitutes. And so page 8, I mean, certainly, as Mike has reported here, we've got a decrease from last year, but there's an increase a little bit from 2 years ago. So, we're somewhere in between in this coming month, and I have been able to secure substitutes. Of course, the most challenging substitute replacements, which has been for a number of years, it's not just COVID, has been for education assistants. We do have a shorter list of substitutes for education assistants, and that's sort of been the case for a long time. And then we've got basically the page 9 focuses on what I just talked about, the school level capacity to continue to expand welcoming people into their buildings. And so they're treading carefully. I think, diligently trying to find ways to re-engage, as I think so like 2 trustees here who sort of have their hearts filled by engagement with students. And so certainly, that parents have their hearts filled with engagement with their children involved. And I know that when we started to open up for sport for high school, middle school parents, have been like really happy. We're hoping that we can continue to expand that over time. Is there any questions from trustees? Great.
And I keep forgetting to look at my computer. It's in my office. I keep forgetting to look at my office. The restriction exemption program, that's on the computer.
It's on our website. Yes.
On the website.
Yes.
And when you talk about an example of rewards recognition, that would also be the example of, say, a choir. That would be included as those examples.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know that we did discuss something about the trustees. We need to provide money, or that we either been tested or we have our vaccinations. Right? Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, and I think you'll get an email from HR.
Okay, thank you.
Any other calls? I have a question about the FAQ on page 9, how are outside agencies currently delivering services to students?
I was just wondering, so it indicates that, many contractors are providing face-to-face services in schools, as long as they meet the REP requirements. And I was just wondering, whether there's a criteria about which agencies are returning. I know that, our division has many, service providers outside the district, just wondering how it's decided who is campus for.
So, yeah, they have to meet our requirements certainly, and so Christine, Lee has taken care, as well as Laura, they sort of work collaboratively to make sure that all of our service providers, were sort of in compliance with that, and there's a procedure specifically for that. But that might get into the question on Christina, and where I could also talk about, we've been able to actually keep the services continued with our students in schools different ways or virtually. So, Christine, Laura?
So we, according, per our procedure, we sent out declaration of compliance forms to all our independent contractors and tenants and asked them to, complete that. And what that requires them is they're responsible for saying that their staff will either be fully vaccinated or submit maybe COVID tests if they're not vaccinated. And they're responsible for doing that. And, I've got all of that. It was actually very, very good for what we sent out. I mean, it's everybody. So it was, we did transportation, food services, nutrition providers, some of our educational consultants, the glass, boys and girls club, all those providers that are looking at different things. And our facilities contractors, technology contractors.
I think just a quick heads up, because there have been some questions from friends that come our way around field trips, because of course, many of field trips that we used to go on would now be field trips that have REPs. And so we are developing a pre-screening field trip form for teachers. Of course, we cannot ask children and their parents their child's status. However, we will likely be sending out a quick form to say I would prefer for my child to A, attend the trip, or B, receive an educational experience that would be parallel and remain at the school. That way we're at very least programming for kids and not eliminating them or creating a barrier for these students who may or may not be able to access those programs as a field trip for, right? We've tried to work around that piece and support families in the way that we can.
Thank you, Laura. Any further questions?
It's donations and support, and I know, and I think this, one of the reasons, sorry, about my friends, we live in an incredibly generous community. We're very, very lucky. So certainly the donations and support piece on the board agenda. We had, this month, Cannibal Pizza sort of delivered a check for $700 complete with bottom. I'm talking up a pizza fundraiser and another $250 to Galbraith School, and those are examples of very generous donations that happen across our division all the time. And I know that it's like we don't even catch all of them here because I know that things happen in schools as well. And so we're very, very fortunate to have that happen. Acknowledgement of excellence in our showcase. Again, I won't read it to trustees. I really encourage you to, read through it every month. Now we'll showcase 2 schools, right? 2 or 3, sometimes 2 usually. So Nicholas Sharon Elementary School is showcased this month as well as High School. And you notice there's events and for students and for staff. And so certainly if you're, a trustee that is the liaison for that school, you can kind of know, okay, which staff or kids or events were showcased in the report. And even if you aren't a liaison, you still know if you run into those schools, if you want to drop the principal a note or staff members a note, that provides you with really good information in terms of what are some things that those schools are really proud of. We have, Lethbridge School Division has amazing schools and incredible staff and kids. And so anytime that we can recognize them in different ways, they're well served, because all of them work so incredibly hard to make the places they're in great places to be. And so that there is there for you to draw from in terms of if you want to provide your own recognition. And calendar of events, I always say, do we have that right? All right, that's always good. And any questions about the calendar of events? Is there anything that we missed?
I'm just wondering, I saw the November 9th for trustee orientation on ASPA. Virtual. We received very else. My understanding is we don't need to do that for you, but not for the same way. Anything else? 30 minutes, right?
Yeah, just on the, as the general meeting, who do we let know in the division office that we like to go, and then what's the procedure? Do we phone up and
I've got an accommodation set aside for everyone, right? And then you register yourself with the event.
okay,
And then, so, if I've got this right, they would register themselves, but they need to let you know, Leanne, if you're going, because then that, so that they can keep track of the accommodation.
I will contact the facility to make sure that they know you're coming in.
and when we register, because it's been a few years, we pay for the registration, and then
Yes.
you get the receipt back, and is that the same at the hotel?
Yes,
So the hotel,
yes, we've done it. Although occasionally you've gone as well, Sharon, but I've only secured, I've only put.
reserve the room, so typically, the trustees will pay themselves and then use, submit them
On the
to,
online form.
in the online form. See, I don't know what I'm talking about. Christine Lee knows what she's talking about.
And I should let you know for the registration, is there a billing after the event? So you can go and register and then.
And the other question is, mileage. Now we keep track of the mileage, and we submit.
Yeah, so there's maybe tomorrow, I'll show you how
Yeah,
we
that'd
did
be
all the expense reimbursement. And
We'll
I'll
have
walk
that
you
on.
through that so that you guys have a feel for it, and then when you go to do it, if you need help.
Okay, thank you.
Good topic to add to our agenda.
Leanne, is there a deadline that you would like people to know when you select this?
Yes, it's possible. I don't have a road deadline.
Okay.
But yeah.
So if you can let her know one way or the other, if you are going or not, and then she'll go to church.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Or if I missed anything? Okay. So next, thank you.
Vision Wellness Committee.
Donna Hunt attended just one before the changeover, so it's there for your reading or review.
Excellent. Next meeting will have Division School Council.
Yeah, and I will provide an oral report, and it can be found on the division website. This was, of course, their election meeting, and so their new chair is Shelley Ruth, and their vice chair is Allison Almador. I won't read the whole roster of leaders in that group. Two key discussion points worth mentioning was conversation at the division wellness meeting committee expressed interest in gathering feedback from parents, but were resources themselves they could use to support wellness and wellness. So that request was sent out to different school councils to receive that feedback. And there was also conversation on selection of resources. And so I believe that the November 8th meeting is the next meeting, the education portion. Karen Madison will be talking about the process of selecting school resources. And that is that.
Excellent, thank you. Any questions for Christine? Okay. Moving on to the poverty intervention report.
Yeah. So I won't go through every point. I'm
you've read this report, I think something worth iterating is just the continued increased need of food, the continued increased need of support for our families. We're seeing a higher number of families accessing the food bank, accessing the need for resources, and I think now, especially that government grants are moving away from us, we're going to be seeing a continued need. So what we've done as a committee is we increased the amount on the gift card from 25 to 35 because groceries are more expensive. So we're maintaining that amount. And we're also enabling families with more than 4 members to access 2 land banks for a weekend rather than one. Because one is do you have a question?
Yeah, can you just vote?
Oh, yeah, the land banks are. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so land banks are weekends and more banks, and these are emergency food banks that we give to families in need of food. And so these contain a supply of pantry staples. And what's really exciting is when this program started, the leadership student team at Wilson Middle School actually put these bags together. They online shopped for the groceries, they pulled recipes, they gave ideas. It was a really phenomenal experience for these students to participate in serving their division students here in this way and their families. And so families can access once a month a bag, and if there's continued need, then Dan Presley Roberts and the team will have conversations with the family of acquiring more sustainable food support. So that is the land bank program, and I believe last year we served over 300 bags. So significant. Let me see. What else should I highlight? We're starting the budget. I didn't put this in the report number 10. Karen Massey provided the financial report. The numbers were in my September report, but here I'll add our year start for our budget is $152,076.55. So it's a great position to be in. That amount can go down quickly. So just working on how to be creative in frugality and support. So if anybody has any other questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Great.
Christine, the family support supervisor, is that FCSS?
Can I ask you what number you're on?
Well, just on the committee member.
Oh, yeah. So Deanna Preston Roberts she works here in division office, and she was our Making Connections coordinator, and that title changed over to family support supervisor.
And mental health.
And
She
yes, thank you.
she has 2 roles.
Yeah.
So she oversees 2 different budgets and hires different staff to run different services.
So one of the questions I have on this, to provide the breakfasts in number 14, are we accessing money from the family community, FCSS, I can never remember what the all stand for.
Our schools have varying needs of students acquiring support. Some schools have been phenomenal at creating community partnerships that basically provide breakfast and or lunches to their school. Some access provincial funding on top of what poverty intervention provides. Poverty intervention provides each school $1,000 per year to subsidize food received from provincial nutrition grants. So often that will be in-class snacks or what have you. Yeah. So not just one source of funding.
Yeah. So just to follow up, I know in some of the smaller communities, the FCSS is quite involved in supporting poverty intervention, especially supplying money for the breakfasts. So I'm just wondering if we've accessed the same money.
Yeah, so FCSS beginning to transition to an umbrella called CWSS, Community Wellness Safety Strategy. And it's the city of Lethbridge, and it's a cross-agency. And so with respect to urban, the SCSS traditionally does support the urban area with so much as food sustainability and service sustainability, right? And so I guess if I could just sort of, it's broadly think it that way, where it's been a lot more where there's been positions or individuals, such as making connections or other, and I'm sure there's, other organizations that have had traditionally what's called SCSS funding to support those support services. The food sources come from, as Christine would suggest, a variety of sources from faith-based community to, the food bank to donation to, there's just all, and of course the government nutrition program as well, right? For our Alberta education funding. And so now I'm not saying hasn't been any SCSS funding for food, but I would say that the SCSS in the urban has been more targeted to services.
Thank you.
Christine, I know you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, because I know what you're talking about, so just for clarity, the FCSS funding for Lethbridge, is more of a support service, whereas in the rural community, the surrounding community, it is a service provider, like it is, there's an office and a staff that is an FCSS worker, and that's just, it's just.
Any other questions? And next is the policy advisory committee. The report is there. We'll read two policy covers later. Any questions for that one? Next is the Indigenous Education Committee.
Thank you. So this was my first Indigenous Education Committee meeting, and it's just a lovely group of people that are serving our students. So the report is before you. And I think the things that stood out to me are the incredible care that our workers, our grad coaches, are having with our students. So I'll mention that a lot of older grade 10 students may not have attended last year due to the pandemic. So there's just a lot of focus on mental wellness, connecting, allowing them to feel seen and belonged, and just provide, just speaking to those mental wellness needs. And there's a lot of anxiety, and so really bringing back, drawing Indigenous culture into the holistic healing process of these students, and it was just beautiful to hear how she's connected with her students at this part. The teacher reports, I think they're excited that capacity is being built in our schools. There's lots of really great opportunities where Indigenous culture is being interwoven into the teaching of students. And one thing I appreciate is we're moving from things and resources to just, okay, how do we teach this? How do we embed it and do this as part of the conversation? And so, yeah, I think that's good for my report presentation. If there are any questions or anything you've read, I think one is happy to answer.
Any questions? Thank you for the report. You can go forward with that. Yes. Over education, over the health. There for your connection. So that you have both of them. Are there any questions on the first one? Only good.
So I will make just a real quick comment on the ASBOA communication. Certainly, okay commendations to our Director of Finance, our board, because certainly it's under his
work and jurisdiction that we received from the Tourist Budget Award, and very prestigious award for us to get, which demonstrates huge diligence in terms of our financial reporting and more important, connecting our financial planning and reporting to board priorities, because that's a central part of this award, which a lot of divisions don't necessarily do. It's that direct connection and explicit demonstration of connection of the financial reporting with board priorities. So, so that was, I just wanted to commend Mark for our Director of Finance for doing his work for the division.
That definitely is wonderful. Presentation.
If you're 17, you've got it. If you're 17.
Any comment?
Who first started getting that award, Christine?
Excellent. Okay, so we are at adjournment. What I would like to just ask is we still need to go back to look at that process piece in terms of where we were wanting to move our work. At this point, we can move to go into active September and then after that. Okay,
I move that we go in camera.
and any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. And those that are on public, I don't know if there are people still on, but we will be turning off at this point when we come back to adjourn the regular board meeting. That's all it is for us to adjourn at that point. We won't be